Hello and welcome back to Mirror Interpretation Todorova. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. My name is Yoana. I am an interpreter and a polyglot. And in today's video, I'm going to share a training that I created, cultural awareness in medical interpreting and translation. And so I'm going to share this training with you. I've been working on this training for about a month now. And I'm happy to share it with you. This training have a long story, a long odyssey. However, I believe the world needed, and this is why I'm sharing it. Before I start, I'd like to let you know that some of the topics that we're going to discuss during this video aren't going to be comfortable. Neither for you if you're American, if you belong to another culture. This also may be some things that make you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable or angry maybe or emotional. Before I go to this training, I also like to let you know that not every single person coming from a particular culture would have exactly the same standards. However, this training is based on majority experiences and observations from not only me, but other interpreters that share their story with me. And the first portion in this training will be cultural awareness in interpretation translation training for providers, doctors, interpreters, and anyone who use an interpreter or speak to a person that come from a different cultural background and like to learn a little bit more. Let's develop cultural awareness together. So the first few slides will be based on what is culture, what is considered, where it's coming from, and what not. The second portion of this video will be based on the 4 standards, California National and Code of Ethics for Translators. We have 4 standards. I have gone through these standards and I have underlined the most challenging moments of those standards and if they're culturally sensitive and how they implement the respect for other culture, how those standards are actually perceived in real life when interpreters apply them. And the last portion of this training will consist, we're going to talk about the few religions and culture. We're going to discuss Muslim religion, Christian religion, Hindu religion, and China, because China is considered a country that has no religion, or some portion of Chinese do believe in Buddhism or the gods that brings you money. And after we finish the religion portion, we are going to talk about what is appropriate in different cultures. Italy, Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Slavic countries, Switzerland, Swiss, Norway, Denmark countries, Russia, of course. It's about 10 countries, survey-based training, what is appropriate in your culture. And then the last portion will be American culture compared to US culture. What is okay for Americans and what is not okay for other cultures. Let's start, guys. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Yoana. I am an interpreter, translator, and content creator. The name of my company is Mirror Interpretation Todorova. There is some bilingual training that you can purchase at Mid Interpretation Trainings on my platform on Thinkific. You can watch free videos on YouTube as this one that I am providing you right now. I have a master in business management at completed University of Perugia in Italy 2016, business administration. University of Perugia in Italy in 2013. I have bachelor degree in business development and sociology, completed in Track University of Stara Zagora 4 years degree where I study business psychology, sociology, and so on. Very interesting. I do have a BTG, CCHI, and NBCMI certifications. I speak Bulgarian, Italian, Russian, Macedonian, and English. I'm studying Spanish right now with you guys. So stay tuned to those Spanish videos. And let's start with the first portion. What is culture? We're gonna set this by the Arthur Asa Berger, who gave us an very interesting and beautiful definition of culture. This is by the Journal of Media Culture, or GIU. Harvard Sociology, what is culture based on Harvard, and what does culture mean for National Code of Ethics and Practices for interpreters in healthcare. Arthur says the word culture comes from Latin cultis, which means care, and from the French coler. Coler means to till or till the ground. There are many terms that stem from the word culture. For example, there is a term cult, which suggests some kind of religious organizations. We are continually amazed by the power cults have to shape behavior, to brainwash us, to turn intelligent and educated people into fanatics. We are dealing with the power of charismatic personalities and of a group over individuals. Groups over individuals. If the cult can exercise enormous power over individuals, and the groups of people, can we state that culture also can do the same thing, not usually to the same extreme degree. So what this author is trying to tell us with this beautiful comparison with cults, brainwashing, and power the cults have, how subconsciously the culture impact us, impact our decision-making process, our way of thinking, our way of judging. Obviously not to the way of being fanatics, but indeed culture is this invisible power that can mold humans into things, into decision, and so on. Then we have a second portion of this. There is also the term cultivated, which means something that has been grown, or realm of aesthetics and art, sophisticated tastes, just as a plants only exist because they are cared for some cultivator over a period of time. So people taste the cultivation only are developed by education and training. It takes time to develop a refined sensibility. And yes, once again, this cultivation, the second portion of the word cultivated, which mean to preserve, to take care, to grow and nourish. Indeed, culture is very strong where the origins are. Let's say you are coming from Jordan, and there everything is structured and everybody follow this exactly the same cultural rituals to pray 5 times a day or whatnot. So to avoid this, it's very, I would say, close to impossible in this country. But the moment that people come to USA, this cultivation stops, and slowly, slowly, these cultural beliefs and traditions are left behind. So Arthur explained this very beautifully here in this portion of the journal. This is just a little set of the journal mediaculture.org. You can read the entire article there if you like to. I just thought that was very interesting to see. And then Harvard Department of Sociology described culture as both causal agent and adaptive force. We study a wide range of practices, instructions, including racial identity, poverty, and inequality, collective memory, symbolic boundaries, cultural capital, class culture, disciplinary culture, evaluation, nationalism, colonialism, economic change, slavery, trafficking, freedom, popular and Black youth culture, sports, transnationalism, networks, and cognition. Our theoretical orientation as drivers and includes ranging from pragmatic views of culture as a dynamic and contextual practices to structural nations of culture as durable norms and values. Dynamic and structural. You see how complicated is that? You can read the entire Harvard research about culture at sociology fas.harvard.edu pages culture.com. Very, very interesting how complicated it is to put a culture in one word and try to explain it and try to understand. However, before I proceed, I think the most beautiful thing about this Harvard Department of Sociology research is that describe a culture as dynamic and then stational nations. So we have a portion of the culture that is dynamic expression, which could be through practicing religion, tradition, celebrating certain things and whatnot. And then we have another, which is structural, which is the norms, which is the rules that nobody tell you, but you adhere to naturally when you switch from one culture to another. Very interesting topic. If you want to read entirely, you can go ahead and look this website online. And now, what is culture based on the National Code of Ethics for Interpreters in Healthcare, which is defined as culture is an abstraction that is mediated in such individual by their unique circumstances, experiences, such as their personality, family values, belief, class, gender, education, personal characteristic, level of acculturation into another culture. Culture, therefore, is manifested in each individual in a different way. Very, very interesting. Once again, the National Council of Healthcare Interpreting did give us this definition. The beautiful part of this definition, in my opinion, is that therefore they recognize that could be slightly different in different individual. More educated the person is, more emancipated, more mannered and whatnot, the cultural beliefs of using certain words or slang can be discipline or can be educated differently. That's what I believe makes this annotation very interesting. So based on these few descriptions of culture, what is that? So the culture from Latin is cultus, which means care and form something. Code that have power to shape our behavior, shape and guide dynamic and contextual practices, and to shape durable norms and values. It's abstraction that is mediated in each individual. So you see how complicated is that. So therefore, the culture is manifested in each individual in a different way, but how culture, ethics, standard protocols, professionalism in interpreting translation are intertwined and connected with each other, because despite that the culture is perceived individually, there are some invisible, powerful norms that drives each of us in some kind of a range of actions, range of decision-making, range of behaviors. So in the next section of this training, I'm going to talk about how the National Standards Code of Ethics, Practice, and Protocols encompass the cultural awareness. National Standards of Practice in Healthcare, National Code of Ethics in Healthcare, California Standards for Interpreters, and National Code of Ethics and Standards for Translators. That's the first part of this training, and let's proceed. Before I start, I'd like to clarify for once again, for the millionesium of times, the difference between interpreting and translating. I did take this beautiful information from Atta net.org. This is American Translation Association. If you want to read the full portions, you can go ahead and read it. I am not going to read this slide for you guys. I'm just going to remind for everyone who use interpreters. The interpreters is the people who speak. They speak loudly like I'm doing right now from one language to another. They do the immediate portion. Translators do the writing. The writing, it's mean written text as these slides. You see it on one language and then you do it to the other language in written as this note right above the translation. I'm not gonna read this, but you can read it if you like to. You can pause the video. You can read what Atta has to say. What's the difference between interpreting and translations? Very interesting. Translators work in one direction, interpreters works in two directions. I would like to add something in this annotation here that Atta said. If you're in a highly effective and business skill, for example, in Europe, in trade fairs, you work in one direction. The interpreters work, for example, just versus Russian or just versus, it's called working in a cabin. When people negotiate, when big businesses, when government negotiate, usually the interpreters can do only one direction, only versus Italian, versus Russian, versus English, versus, there are always two interpreters. One will do versus Russian, the other will do versus Italian, for example. Yes, interpreter indeed are used to do both directions sometimes, especially here in the USA in consecutive medical interpreting or in legal interpreting and whatnot. But indeed, there is some cases or situation or scenarios where interpreters do versus one, and this is highly, highly on a high level, highly professionally. National Code of Ethics for Interpreters in Healthcare. So I went through this code personally and I read it probably, I don't know how many times, to find every single portion that talk about cultural awareness and why it's so important for interpreters to be culturally aware. And I take portion of these protocols and practice and code of ethics to use them and to comment on how those practices and ethics are actually perceived by medical providers. What is the biggest challenges of interpreters when we use those practices, those protocols, we try to follow them, and how the providers react on this type of standards. I really would love to hope that as much possible medical interpreters, medical providers, doctors, nurses can see that training. The reason that I'm launching this for free is because I believe in what I'm sharing, because I believe the world needs to hear this training. The world needs to be educated about these practices. Medical providers, doctors do need to know how their culture influenced them, how they have a prejudice or a cultural bias using interpreters and so on. So let's get ready and let's start talking about these practices. Before I start, as we talk about ethics, what is ethics? We're talking about the ethics for healthcare interpreters. What is ethics? Human beings are ethical animals. Simon Blackburn, 2001. From the earliest time of human consciousness, human beings have been considered with defining rules of conduct, setting expectations for what is considered appropriate or not appropriate, the right behavior with respect to oneself, others, and the environment, in this case, the environment where we are at, and the humans behave exceptionally well. So ethics are behaviors in order to find what the shared accepted principle of right and wrong in given social group around us. Those shared governing principle of rights and wrong become familiarized in a number of ways. For example, cultures embodies them in their norms and custom, religions and their norms and principle, governments in the law, and professionalism in the code of ethics. However, when we talk about culture and ethics, there are so many things that are embodied in the culture and so many things that are considered not appropriate, but nobody talks about it. And today we are going to talk about what exactly is appropriate. Before I start, I'm going to give you a short framework about code of ethics for interpreters. If you are interpreter, if you're using an interpreter, this is the rules that the interpreter have to follow, have to keep confidential, interpret everything, accuracy, impartiality, communicate or stuck into the interpreter's professional role, and we're going to discuss those, awareness of their own culture, treat everyone with respect, advocate when the patient's health and well-being is in danger, develops their knowledge and skill, and treats and work and act in professional and ethical manners. We're going to break those down, and we're going to see how providers respond to interpreters following those rules. I have a talk with different interpreters and their challenges in the last 10 years, and you're going to see my comments on this and what interpreters are most challenged. Cultural frame. Without understanding that the speaker's cultural frame of reference is part of their meaning system, the interpreter may miss the speaker's intended message by focusing only on words. So why it's so important for interpreters to care about the culture and whatnot? Again, this cultural frame has a prejudice that the interpreter can miss or not understand. We as an interpreter are aware of the cultural meaning of certain behaviors and things, and I'm going to break those down in these slides, in these trainings for you, which are approximately 100. So let's continue. Confidentiality. Information sharing with family members. In many cultures, family members are considered extension of the individual. Knowledge about particular culture norms does not translate directly into knowledge about particular person family system. Or number two, conflict with confidentiality is information to be withheld from patients. In some situations, there is a very strange situation in medical. The norms of the USA medical system value and protect the authority of the individual. It is with the individual that the right to know the results of their own medical tests, which in theory it's very beautiful, but hereby I'm going to talk about what is culturally inappropriate for other cultures, because these standards are based only knowing American culture and considering the American culture about confidentiality. There is no such a rule, or there is no such a flexibility of family member to allow his status of health to be divulged to friends, family, and whatnot. So everything is kept very confidential. But in many cultures, Eastern Europe, Muslim culture and whatnot, not sharing information about family member health is considered extremely rude, extremely inappropriate. This is extremely offensive. I would say to the level of insane, because in Europe, for example, calling the hospital and asking about the well-being of a friend, for example, or member or acquaintance who had a car accident is considered part of the culture. And not only, but people that call, if somebody is sick, they get the information, if the time of visits, and they often bring something like food, if it's appropriate, or if it's possible, if the doctors allow, flowers, gifts, chocolate. And the visiting the patients in Eastern Europe is part of cheering up and helping the person and morally supporting them to get better. Here in USA, if I call the hospital and ask about even my boyfriend, I'm not gonna receive the information. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, we have the rules of confidentiality, which is amazing. However, for some culture, this is extremely inappropriate. So if we want to be exactly culturally sensitive, there should be a waiver of this form. For cultures like this, who considered not calling, not caring, not trying to find out, extremely humanless, careless, extremely offensive, extremely inappropriate. Faithfulness. The importance of ensuring that the content and spirit is faithfully rendered. It means meaning, the context that they're speaking, the value of fidelity, to have faithful converting from one language to another without adding, omitting, or changing the original messages, and conveyance of what? Totality of the meaning, including the culture of the individual. So this is very beautiful. The standards are amazingly structured. However, this create a conflict of interest. If the interpreter interprets accurately, a lot of times doctors get very, very upset. Why? Because in USA, it's culturally unacceptable to instruct doctors to read protocols to them. Usually, when interpreters interpret certain messages, this is considered rude, unprofessional, and there is something wrong with the interpreter. So if interpreters read instructions, for example, to the doctors are not very welcoming to this. The doctors are not educated about interpreters' roles and culturally do not accept any instructions. Being faithful, especially if the message is not very flattering for the doctor, is never welcome. It's always resented. The interpreter's faithfulness to the message, including the possibility of cultural barriers, fully conveying discriminatory, prejudicial, derogatory marks, the need of interpreters to clean the messages up and make them nice. Okay, and I'm gonna clarify for you guys where the need to clean a message comes from. Doctors are extremely aggressive, extremely, I would use the word cocky sometimes, extremely resentful, and so on. Being faithful put the interpreter at risk to receive a complaint, being accused of not being professional. For USA, culture is not acceptable to say certain things to a doctor and provider. Doctors mistakenly believe that the interpreter is making mistake or performing poorly if their words the patient used are offensive to the doctors. Unfortunately, in USA, the doctors feels like a powerful authority and using a colorful words as are usually used in a lot of cultures in USA is not acceptable. The doctors react with resentment, anger, hostility, and other similar reactions towards the interpreters usually because the interpreters are considered below. Interpreters need to render everything that it says, and potential source of data. Offensive language used by patient may sometimes part of their condition. And the interpreter obligation to be faithful and interpret everything accurately. This is very beautiful standard. However, cultural conflict. Here I'm gonna read some responses of a doctors that I have received while I interpret. Doctor, interpreter, you got a problem. How dare you? For example, in certain cultures, like in Europe, using curse word is common practice during the conversations. Anyone with the doctor, without the doctor, with the professor, use the words, and I'm not talking about extreme vulgarities, but it's part of the culture. For doctors in the USA, using some words are perceived as the person is cursing at me. This is not, I'm sorry, there is a typo here. It's not unexceptional. It's not something that you can, it's offensive, rude. And the doctors become angry with the interpreters because the doctors are not aware that we have to follow those practices. And I'm really hoping that we are changing this with these slides today. The interpreters try to maintain impartiality and refrains from canceling advertising. Interpreters maintain the boundaries of the professional role, refrain from involvement. Again, this is the role boundary of the interpreter. Very beautiful standard. Let's talk about how is this perceived. For example, interpreter instructs doctors, please speak directly to patient. Do not address the interpreter. The interpreter role is to interpret and cannot speak on behalf of either party. Doctor's response. Do listen, do what I say. Interpreter, go ahead and ask him to tell you if he has a headache or so on. Doctors and medical professionals are often unaware of the boundaries and practices of the interpreter role. Doctors and medical staff become offended when interpreters read protocols and ask them to follow rules. It is culturally unacceptable for medical staff and doctors to receive instruction. The doctors feel like authority and it's absolutely taboo to instruct them. I have made many surveys until I discover why doctors get upset. The interpreter culturally strives to develop awareness of their own culture, including biometrical cultures, to perform their professional duties, understanding the cultural biases. Secondary, these principles also know that make cultures that interpreters may encounter in course of performing their duties. Culture, therefore, is manifested in each individual in different ways. Yes, indeed, the culture is different. However, there is some very strict gaps and lines how people behave coming from different cultures. In this beautiful statement, there is a cultural prejudice that interpreters does not understand different cultures and needs to strive to understand. I'm going to elaborate, guys. Please do not get offended. Interpreters are humans who actually have faced a different reality. It's called a cultural crush. When you move from one country to another, and unfortunately, in order to survive, you have to adapt, you have to mold, you have to understand and change. And this is very difficult, especially if you move in more than one countries, because you experience this psychologically, physiologically as well. Medical providers have never had to overcome cultural prejudice. They had never had to fit into a culture, and because of this, medical staff needs to strive and work harder to understand people from different cultures and different backgrounds, because the medical providers who has not have a different culture, who has born and raised here, has absolutely never had to fit, to smash against a specific cultural prejudice, misunderstandings, judgments, and whatnot. Interpreter, on the other side, have lived in different cultures and they have to adapt to different culture, beliefs, barriers, prejudice, and whatnot. So naturally, interpreters have way more knowledge about that. But the interpreter have no power to transmit this knowledge to medical providers during an interpreting session. And this is why I'm creating this video, hoping that this is gonna change the world. You can laugh on me, but I believe we need this training here in America. Develop cultural awareness. Whose responsibility is to be culturally competent? And some healthcare interpreters, why they have the obligation to be culturally competent? The answer is very simple, because it's a value of ethical principle that should be shared by all members of the medical team, including the interpreter. Well, this is very beautiful. Once again, we have targeted the interpreter in these protocols, and the interpreters are perceived as ignorant that have to strive to learn. But here in the USA, we have something called melting pot. You can go ahead and read what is the melting pot culture. But this is a social, cultural tendency, if you want to call it, where everything that is different from home is judged, bullied, shamed, and not accepted. So to survive in this big melting pot where everything is pressuring you from the outside, people tend to drop their own culture, belief system, traditions, and start to try to fit and belong in society. It's like a natural instinct to survive. People who are born in America do not have to fit. Nothing is pressuring them. There is no stress. There is no judgment. There is no bully. One of my friends that is Latina tries to teach her son Spanish, and where he goes to school, he is bullied to speak Spanish because he speaks Spanish. The moms want him to speak Spanish. He's 6 years old and pre-garden, preschool, whatever. And when he's about maybe a few years ago, the boy was 10. He absolutely refused to speak Spanish. The reason why is because he's bullied at school. So for a fragile psyche, like a little boy, he rather not speak Spanish to the point that he does not want to speak Spanish at home. This is how strongly the society have power to mold you through shaming, bullying, judging, and whatnot. Respect. The interpreter treats all parties with respect. Principle to remain interpreter that they have obligation to treat everybody in the encounter with dignity, respect, courtesy, individual including their own. Are the interpreter treated with respect? The answer is no, because once again, interpreters are perceived as below everyone, as under your shoes type of thing. And because of this, it's culturally not acceptable for anyone to instruct a doctor or medical staff. Reading protocols, asking medical staff to follow them is considered arrogant, disrespectful, rude, and is extremely resented. As the interpreter, I have been and I am daily offended with and often bullied and threatened to receive complaint. If I state the protocol, please address the person directly. There is not one single rule or standard that impose or request the interpreter to be respected. The rules are only unilateral. One direction is called unilateral, and there is no principle, no rules, no practices to protect interpreters, to request the interpreters to be treated with respect and dignity. And probably this is why the interpreters are not treated accordingly. For healthcare interpreters, are they culturally sensitive? Let's dive into these beautiful protocols and see how they are perceived by the providers, by the doctors, by the medical staff, what we need to work on. Summary. What is cultural bias? Ethical principle, cultural responsiveness, protocols, interpreter roles, performance management measures, cultural clarifier, and cultural awareness. And hereby we have a main ethical principle by California Standards for Interpreter. Again, confidentiality, impartiality, respect for all individuals, professionalism, accuracy and completeness, cultural responsiveness. What is cultural responsiveness for the interpreters? To seek to understand how diversity and cultural similarities and differences have fundamental impact on healthcare encounter. During cultural sensitivity and cultural responsiveness, a lifelong process that begins with an introspective work at oneself. How beautiful is that? Professionalism and integrity, accuracy and completeness of the context, cultural original message to the target language, making it possible for patient and providers to communicate directly. And hereby, I'm going to start with the first portion of accuracy. Patients and providers communicating directly is the big challenge because the providers are not trained to use an interpreters, and they do address the interpreters. And if the interpreter read protocols, providers get very upset. Let's proceed. Cultural responsiveness. Interpreters seek to understand how diversity and cultural similarity in different have fundamental impact on healthcare interpreters, personal belief, values, and practices, reflecting and introspection. Discussing cultural awareness is very uncomfortable. People are not aware of their own culture. Some people feel ashamed because their culture, religion, background, and so on. In USA, healthcare providers are held in high regard, and suggesting cultural practices to the doctor is viewed as a breach or violation of personal boundaries, leading to conflict and confrontation. There are very few cultural awareness trainings for American based or regards or trying to open American minds for a different culture. What is acceptable, not acceptable, which make this very difficult for doctors, for medical providers, because I understand that doctors don't purposely mean to be rude or disrespectful. They just feel like their authority in USA, and you trying, how dare you interpreter try to teach me, preach me, or read protocols. You are not professional, there is something wrong with you and whatnot. This is subconscious beliefs that doctors have because they have never trained. They have never been trained. And now we're gonna jump right into protocol 1, pre-session or pre-interview, which means that the interpreter have to introduce, I will keep everything confidential, and interpret everything you say, basically the preset of an interpreter. Believe it or not, this is real situations, how the doctor responds when interpreter set protocols. This is again because there is a cultural prejudice. Interpreter, please remove this section and follow my instructions. No, interpreter, you need to listen to me and follow my instructions. So there is this subconscious belief that the doctor's office, you should adhere to the doctor's instructions. You should not follow any protocols. The doctor should be the goddess superior power that you need to follow there. And the doctors are not educated. They're not aware of the interpreter's role boundaries. And if you read protocol that indicates the doctor to follow certain instructions, they are taken personally. There is a cultural bias, prejudice here, misunderstanding, of course, and lack of education and information, lack of knowledge. And I do hope that you guys, doctors, that you see this training on the other side, you would really not struggle any further using interpreters because of what I'm sharing here. Provider, their name, confidentiality, everything, elements to run smooth, interpret everything spoken by either party. Once again, I'm gonna give an example. For example, ma'am or sir address the patient directly. This is one of the most challenging and complex protocol to follow because big companies that are business driven do not take interpreters enforcing protocols well. This is not welcome. The customer is always right in America. It has the final to say. So the language industry poses challenges for interpreters who adhere to established protocol. Nurses, doctors, medical professionals often respond with this. Interpreter, do you have a problem? Then another real situation I'm gonna share with you, a call. This is a telephonic interpreter provider. Here interpreter, I'm gonna ask 10 questions. Do takes note, then I will plug you in and you need to confirm this information. And then this provider continues speaking for about 3 or 4 minutes and then state, okay, go ahead, do what I say. Other interpreters do what I say. You just should listen and do what I say. Interpreter, go ahead, ask the questions, do your job. The challenges that are happening in setting boundaries of interpreting role boundaries and so on, following these protocols are extreme because a lot of people, a lot of medical staff believe that I am their slave, I am below you, and I should follow blindly everything they say because they have power to complain. They feel like they're my boss, they're the interpreter boss, and they do not understand the lack of ability and knowledge is to respect and to adhere the interpreter instructions. Why? Because providers have no training about the boundaries of the interpreter role and how to use an interpreter. They view the interpreter instruction as a culturally inappropriate, inadequate, conflictus, not professional, rude, arrogant, and any possible negative things that we can add. I simply simplify a little bit this portion because we're on YouTube and I don't want to use any profanity, but I have heard a lot of not adequate responses when I state protocols because it's culturally not appropriate for interpreters to instruct medical staff. Number two, this is the biggest challenge that I have experienced following the protocol number two. Support patient provider, direct communication, direct relationship, address them to speak to each other directly using first person. This is protocol 2 of California Standards of Healthcare Interpreters. Very beautiful protocol. And indeed, if the both parties follow those protocols, the session is really smooth and easy and pleasant and polite. And you doctors that are trained, that are attentive, that are respectful, you can make this happen. This is the truth. But let's give some real examples. Doctor, please speak directly to the patient. Do not address the interpreter. The interpreter role is to interpret. I cannot speak on the behalf of either party. The doctor's response: do listen, do what I say, go ahead, ask him to tell you if he's feeling pain or he have a nausea. Once again, it's culturally unacceptable for American medical staff or doctors to receive instructions from anyone. And the providers get angry, offended, and upset because this is perceived as a personal attack and disrespect from the interpreter. During the encounter, maximize and encourage, once again, direct communication between patient and provider, address each other directly. Well, this is beautiful again. I'm going to talk about pausing and I'm going to comment about asking providers to make pauses to make sure interpreters interpret accurately because this is consecutive interpretation in medical setting. Some medical providers have a statement, maybe half a page, and they're not aware that the interpreter has not this statement in front of them. I don't have it 99% of the time. And they want to read the entire statement. For example, there is anger, resentment for the interpreters, and so on. Statements, I understand that are something that annoys providers, but they do have to go through them personally and make the patient sign those or disclosures. A lot of times they just want to muffle this real fast and just ask the final question. But to be accurate, interpreter have to interpret everything and have to understand it and ask it in the target language to make sure that the person understands the statements and in the end decide agree or disagree. This is another challenge here. Sometimes providers call interpreters, read list of 5 questions and then say, okay, I will add the person now. You can ask him or her. They get resentful, react irritated, angry. If the interpreters read protocols such as interpreter can only interpret, not speak on anybody's behalf, interpreter can interpret, after introducing in the target language, please short sentences and so on. So a lot of times providers pressure interpreters to do things that are not interpreting because once again, they perceive interpreters are below them. You are below me. I'm a doctor. How dare you? Use the first person is usually respected. This protocol is easy to follow. Manage the smooth flow of communication, clarification when necessary, and consider interrupting the communication process. This is California protocols. I'm gonna elaborate on those. Managing the flow. When the interpreters instructs providers how to use short phrases and often respond, sometimes it's responded, but I need to read entire statement and ask for permissions. Yes, we interpreters know that some statements are 5 pages. I cannot memorize 5 pages. I am not a superwoman. So managing the flow of the session could be very, very challenging if the medical staff does not collaborate, especially because medical staff feel like they are the boss of the interpreter, that they're entitled to give you instructions or order you, and you have to follow them. It is culturally not acceptable to allow power to the interpreter to manage anything, because the doctors are the one who feel empowered, and the doctors are the one who feel entitled to give you instructions or make you follow directions. Culturally, this is inappropriate. Asking for clarification is not always welcome. The last portion, consider interrupting. Interrupting, if it's done politely, is always accepted as a conflict, and the provider do not follow the interpreter's protocol statements. They are resented once again because interpreter is perceived as a level below. Okay, interpreter roles, message converter, clarifier, cultural clarifier roles go beyond message clarification to include a range of actions that typically relate to interpreters' ultimate purpose of facilitating communication between the parties and clarify culturally specific ideas. This is very beautiful on paper. However, cultural clarifications are not welcome. There is instances when providers are not willing to learn about customs. For example, I have situations where the clarifying was, the offering of cultural clarification was responded by, do your job without adding those things. I know better. Interpreter, please do what I say. I don't care about those things, and so on. Cultural clarification is not something that is accepted with open arms. Let's call it like that. Advocacy for the patient. So this rule says that the interpreter have a right to be in the role of advocate for the person who does not speak English if the well-being and the health or interest of this patient is being endangered. Well, this is never welcome. Of course, it's never welcome in linguistics. There is very strong reaction, aggressive and professional, especially if the doctors or medical staff are pressuring the person to sign a documents and agree to procedures. Often providers refuse it to hear no. For example, if they pressure for vaccine. Some people doesn't want to do vaccines. And I have witnesses providers to exert significant pressure on patients to convince them to do vaccines as elderly or newborns. This is very uncomfortable to assist, but this happens quite often. I have assisted this very, very often. I don't want to say on daily basis, but more or less maybe 99% of the times that I interpret in this setting, the doctors do not want to hear no. And Russian woman doesn't want to vaccine the babies right away. So this is imagine. Again, because the doctors in America are not used to have someone saying no. Cultural clarifier, culture determine how people behave, make decisions, communicate and interact with each other. Concepts will sometimes exist in language and not in another one. I would like to talk here about something that is called melting pot. There is a special research. You can go ahead and Google it and read a lot about what is the melting pot culture. Oh, godness. So people who are born and raised in America are not accustomed or educated to care about other cultures, to be aware of them, or to be interested in understanding different cultures. There is a tendency to stereotype and attempt to homogenize these differences into a uniform mass. There is also social pressure to belong and be part of the new, free, exciting, modern country. And people that come to America do try to adapt to the stronger pressure of the society and abandon their proper beliefs to survive. However, not all cultural beliefs can magically disappear overnight, not for people who strive to adapt to American culture, and not to people in America who absolutely do not have any interest in knowing other culture and what is appropriate in those cultures. But we're gonna learn this today. So stay strong, you guys, doing amazing if you're here. We're making the world change. We're making the world a better place because we become and we are getting more culturally aware together. Ethical principle in healthcare based by California standards for healthcare interpreters are confidentiality, impartiality, respect, professionalism, and accuracy. Once again, when we talk about accuracy and completeness, interpreters have to transmit content, spirit, cultural contents in the original messages. These beautiful rules can be followed if the medical staff are also aware of them and treats the interpreter with professional and respectful demeanor. Only thanks to you, doctors, lawyers, medical staff, and nurses, this is possible. If you do not allow this to happen and you start to argue, which happens quite often, it's not possible for these rules to be applied. Accuracy and completeness convey verbal, non-verbal, clarify the meaning, maintain the tone, different cultural understandings, different topics, and some culture use obscenity or offensive word, and principle of accuracy and completeness means that we have to render the offensive messages to doctors and nurses. Curse words, obscenities are norm in some cultures. For example, Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Slavic culture, Spain, Italy. For some culture, using curse word does not mean to curse at someone. It is a form of expression, sign of manliness, of struggle, a way to express stress, to express emotion. In certain cultures, men use curse word as a symbol of their manliness, not to be offensive, but to show that they are tough, for example. In the USA, it's not acceptable to hear a curse word at the doctor-patient office or interacting with professionals. How interesting is that, guys? Performance measures respect the boundaries, professional role, and avoid being involved patient-provider therapeutic relationships. This is very beautiful, this performance measurement for the interpreters. So providers, if you ever ask interpreters a question, interpreters are not allowed to respond and they should read the protocol. I'm not allowed to respond any questions. Please address them to your patient. Legally, from the moment that interpreter introduced to the end of the session, they cannot respond anything related to the patient. But boundaries of the professional role are not welcome or accepted. Doctors are superior, and setting boundaries with them is not appropriate. I notice anger, resentment, resilience, and doctors do lack cultural sensitivity and training, and are unaware of the interpreter responsibilities that we have to establish professional boundaries during the interpreting sessions. Because sadly, there is no trainings for doctors, or if they are, probably they're not very enforced or provided in an adequate manner. I don't know if they are. I have not heard of it, but I hope this is going to be it, this training that we are creating right now with you guys, you and me. So avoid personal topic with patients. For example, I will tell you what's the problem with this protocol. This protocol is beautiful and amazing and really keep the role professional. But if you go in person, for example, Russia, Europe, Kazakhstan, Muslim cultures, if a person refuses to discuss personal matter, they're perceived as a bad, rude person who lack education and manner, not friendly, not professional, and so on. Next one, resist creating expectation by either party that interpreter role cannot fulfill. This is a portion of California standards to resist creating expectation. A very beautiful standard. What is the challenge here? The medical staff is very resentful when interpreters set boundaries of the role. Often interpreters are asked, do confirm information, ask her, do this, do what I ask. While providing services for company in USA, a direct client receiving interpreting requested, interpreter, did you call the patient to confirm her appointment yesterday? I state my professional boundary, interpreting, if scheduled, when scheduled, this is in my contract. I do not work for the clinic, and my job is not to call your patient and confirm anything. The response, other interpreter do it. The receptionist was angry, hostile, rude, and most upset with me. Why? Because I set the boundaries of my profession, which in the eyes of this receptionist that I am way lower than her, I should not dare to do this. Once again, guys, you doctor and medical staff can make this work easy and really pleasant, and you can make it total nightmare. And I hope knowing what you're gonna know in the end of this training is gonna help you to be the best. Inform both parties about limitations in interpreting skills, limitation of knowledge. This is very beautiful, but medical professionals are unaware the limitations of the interpreter. If I communicate that I don't know something, some medical staff react with frustration, anger, eye roll, if I am unfamiliar with a word or medical term. In my experience, some individuals become upset when interpreter requests explanation, because nurses who fill certain questionnaires are also not specialists of these medical terms, and they feel embarrassed to admit their lack of knowledge. So asking for clarification could be very unpleasant for us interpreters because we are resented sometimes. So providers, you can make this amazing by trying to work together with us. Decline bribes, gratitudes, or favors from any party involving in interpreting and culturally sensitive appropriate way. So I understand that we are in a bribe country, bribe culture, this could happen. However, in a lot of culture, bringing food and small gift is not considered bribe, is part of the culture, part of show appreciation, show respect, show that you have manners. And when I say food is like something sweet or something special, homemade food that it takes very long to prepare, chocolate, flowers, and so on. So if doctors refuses those gifts, this is considered rude and sign of disrespect. In a lot of countries, if the patient does not show this gratitude, is considered to have poor manner and lack of basic gratitude, which is judged severely in certain culture. So this practice is very beautiful. However, in reality, it's kind of difficult to follow. Performance, recognize, identify when personal values and cultural belief mold or parties are in conflict. This is for the interpreter once again. It is very uncomfortable to admit that there is a cultural conflict while you interpret, because you can identify that, but when the things are really heated and the doctor is very angry and feel offended, it's very difficult to recognize and explain and calm the doctor off. Interpreter suggests that this is not appropriate. The doctors say, go ahead, interpreter, do your job, ask her. For example, for some questionnaires related to sexuality or something like that. So in the US, it's common to follow the just do it approach without asking why or suggesting. For interpreters, we have no power to remove this cultural prejudice and impose cultural sensitivity, especially in certain environments. You gotta do your job. Saying no to a question and identifying is not culturally appropriate. It is not welcome. I have never seen doctors who are sensitive about this. What is culturally appropriate, especially asking questions about sexuality. There is a married couple and they ask questions, for example, Muslim married couple, and they ask questions about how many partners have you had? This is absolute insult in a Muslim culture in a couple, but we are not so sensitive yet, but I hope we'll become here in America. He identifies statements that indicate lack of understanding regarding health beliefs and practices and so on, potential miscommunication. I'm going to elaborate here in lack of understanding. I'm repeating, this is part of the California standards. I believe that the most challenging setting where I have interpreted for when provider have a basic language from a language and refuse to allow the interpreter to fully interpret, then said, okay, interpreter, I understand, and this provider proceed to ask question on the presumed understanding, which differs from the patient's original statement. And then if the interpreter try to interpret, the provider feeling very proud that they can speak the language, say, stop, interpreter, I told you I understand her. But based on what the provider is asking and presuming is obviously that the provider did not understand. So interpreter who had to adjust to a new reality, they are naturally, inherently more culturally sensitive. On the other hand, providers who lack of multicultural background and are familiar with only with their own culture, beliefs, and so on, rules, they have never faced the challenge to accepting and functioning in under different cultural belief. It's very difficult to try to communicate that because we don't have trainings, but this is training for all of you guys that can do this, treasure of this. The cultural clarifier beyond clarification include the range of actions typically relate to ultimate purposes of facilitating communications. Interpreters are alert to cultural words or concepts that may lead to misunderstanding, triggering shift, and they have to shift into the cultural clarifier role. Well, once again, I'm going to talk about inappropriate questions directed and which are absolutely inappropriate in cultural Slavic, Balkan, Asian, Muslim, Arab, Moroccan, Turkish, Bosnian, Croatian, Russian, Italy, Romanian, Albanian, Palestina, and Latin culture, and those questionnaires are very harmful for married couple, single woman, and any other group. I'm going to give you example of those inappropriate questions. How many sexual partners have you had in the past 3 months, in the past year? Do you use condom? Do you use toys? Do you do, I'm going to not read it, but you could see the slide. Do you engage in sexual activity with both males and females? This is an appropriate, offensive, slut-shaming, extremely irrelevant and highly offensive. If a person comes from a Muslim background and they are a married couple, they cannot be intimate unless they are married. No sexuality is allowed outside of a marriage for females. And those questions cannot be asked. The ladies must be virgin and they cannot cheat. It's taboo. Any questions related to sexual acts are inappropriate. It's taboo. You cannot discuss it with anyone, not even with your husband. This definitely break the relationship with providers. I would personally not visit the doctors who ask me such a questions. I am Bulgarian and I'm not Muslim. A lot of times when I interpret for Muslim couples, those type of extremely inappropriate questions, they hide their embarrassment, shake their heads, stay quiet. They say they don't understand because this is very inappropriate. Another question about sexually transmitted disease, ask, have you ever had STDs? People always say no because it's taboo and shame to admit that you had it. And I believe the same taboo exists here in the USA. Nobody ever says that they had a UTI or anything like that because it's culturally inappropriate. Interrupt the communication process, alert both parties about miscommunication, assist patient explaining the cultural concept. In theory, being a cultural clarifier is easy, but it's not widely accepted in American culture to tolerate things that are different from our own. The individuals and professional lacks the trainings or education to assert or comprehend structures, customs, and traditions from other cultures. For example, doctors take or providers take this clarification personally. For example, sometimes I hear a response, there is no need of this interpreter, it's irrelevant. I did not ask the question. I want you to go ahead and ask the questions. I need answer. Do it now. Again, a lack of cultural sensitivity. Cultural awareness measures the knowledge, skill, sensitivity of responsiveness healthcare professionals and their organization to become aware of the system needs culturally diverse populations and what is eventually culturally appropriate to address those needs. So in Muslim cultures, Turkey, Jordan, Palestine, Iran, Morocco, Egypt, Abu Dhabi, Africa, any countries that have a Muslim background, women have female doctors, male have male doctors. For example, in Jordan, Palestine, women live in the separate sides of the house, guys. There is a side for women and side for men. They do not eat together. They do not sit at the same table together in a social setting. Females serve the males and leave. It's not appropriate to sit with a man. Also in India, it's not appropriate to eat with a man. This is absolute taboo. They cannot be in the same room, especially in the Muslim, is not acceptable, although these cultural beliefs in America, in modern country, have been shaken. But it's not acceptable, it's not adequate. In some cultures, such as Mexican culture, women and men sit separately in the official celebrating like Christmas within the family. I was invited to this Mexican Christmas party, and indeed was very fun and very beautiful. But everybody eat separately, and they only reunite to play some game or something and then separate again. There is no reason for them to sit together. Separate gathering, formal. The only moment of interaction is if they dance. And that's about this. Now we're gonna check what the national standards of practices have to do with cultural awareness, if those standards are different from the California standards. What are standards of practices? Are set of guidelines that define what the interpreter does in the performance of their role. have to be accurate and complete transmission of messages between patient and provider, and to support the patient-provider therapeutic relationships. Very similar to the previous standards, based on the standards ethic guidelines. There is only guidelines for interpreters. There is no standards or ethics or practices how medical staff to use interpreters, which protocols doctors should follow while using an interpreter. One-sided rule which interpreters are incapable of imposing. Accuracy, we discussed accuracy, the previous protocols, spirit of the original message completely, registered tone of the speaker, and everything, even it seems irrelevant and rude. If the medical staff interrupts, speak loudly with the interpreter. Do not allow the interpreter to fully read the message. The rule of accuracy is not going to be applied. It's going to be very challenging for the interpreter to stay focused. Doctors and medical staff have the ability to lower the interpreter's performance by rushing the interpreter, speaking together, making judgmental statements, rolling their eyes, how dare you, making the interpreter repeat 5 times because they don't like the response or because the response is culturally not acceptable for them, because there are no rules for the manners in which medical interpreter should behave or medical provider. There is no rules about how to be respectful and professional while using the interpreter because the medical providers are not trained to. Accuracy and standards of practices. Interpreter have to follow, manage the flow of communication, correct errors in interpretation. Medical staff that lack training on the standards that interpreter must adhere to. If the interpreters, while interpreting, trying to clarify or implement any standard or making any request out of the interpreting, are often silenced and negatively perceived. Interpreters cannot simultaneously handle medical matters and interpret. What I mean by that is providers need to be trained before they use the interpreters about their own cultural limits and bias. And we are doing this in the end of this training. We're going to talk about American culture beliefs against other cultures. This is the greatest challenges for medical providers. Cultural awareness, we're continue to consider national standards of practice, confidentiality, impartiality, cultural awareness, the same as in the previous standards, to facilitate communication across cultural differences, and including the biometrical culture, clarify the cultural misunderstanding if arise, and the role boundary to set the boundary role of the interpreter. To assist and make it possible for interpreters to follow protocols, similar practices, cultural awareness, ethics, and standards should be created and implemented for both medical personnel and everyone who uses the interpreter. If the medical staff is not educated on how to use the interpreter or cultural clarification, silence the interpreter, get upset with similar clarification are offered. One-sided knowledge does not function. The protocols should be provided to all parties who use interpreters, also implemented. I know that this sounds like I'm upset with doctors. I am not. I am upset that nobody provides those people the necessary knowledge to use an interpreter, and I hope we're doing this with you guys today. Professionalism, honest, ethical, prepared, disclose limitations, interpreters avoid site translation. I will clarify for who does not know what is site translation. Site translation is to receive a piece of paper like this one, for example, and ask the interpreter, please read it in English and say it in the target language so the person can understand. The rule says that the interpreter should avoid to do this, especially complex documents. Okay, Side translations. Often medical interpreters face pressure to perform those, and no is not acceptable. If you refuse to provide it, you receive a complaint. As a contractor, you don't want to receive a complaint. Honesty. If the interpreter does not know a word, sometimes staff gets angry, irritated, upset, exercise stress, and exercise pressure and add stress. Being limited in your abilities as a human, not owing everything, is perceived as a bad and not professional. For example, if I believe I know a lot of words in medical, I study a lot, but sometimes it happens I don't know something, and here is what I receive. Well, we don't need you then, and hang up the phone. This happens nowadays, guys. We are limited, unfortunately. We are just humans. It's very hard to do this interpreting job, even though we thrive and strive to study medical terminology. Professionalism. If a medical personnel frequently interrupt, speak loudly alongside, and prevent the interpreter fully comprehending the message or allowing the interpreter to take appropriate notes, it's very challenging to assure accuracy. The interpreter advocates for working condition, respects professional development. If interpreter is correcting an error, they're my own error. For example, this is the interpreter speaking the correct word the patient use is this. This is never resented. I have not have ever bad experiences. And I ask other interpreters, this is not a problem. Advocacy, it's a big conflict. The interpreter's advocacy is never welcome. I have received threats from companies if I decline a call, for example, advocates for working conditions that support quality interpreting. There is no place to file a complaint if interpreter is abused, mistreated, or not paid. Companies are late with their payments and do not incur any penalties, and bringing them to civil court to request payment is complex, expensive, and lengthy procedure. Which is kind of sad. There is no guidelines for medical professionals on how to show respect for interpreters. There is no rules forcing medical staff to not interrupt. There is a typo here. The word is do not interrupt, discuss, argue, or disagree with interpreters. There is no ethics standards or any outline how to use interpreter with respect and professionalism. Only unilateral requests are made. And the professional field of interpreters does not equalize the rules, equal treatment with respect for interpreters, unfortunately. And now we're going to talk about National Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice for Translators and Education. Does those rules differ from the previous one? What is translation, the role of translation? What is cultural bias, cultural awareness, and cultural thinking? This is by trace.com blog about what is translation. Translation is a process of converting the meaning of a written text from one language to another. Human translation is generally more expensive but offer several advantages. Translators capture the nuances such as sarcasm, humor, and so on. They are specializing in industry and can domain-specific knowledge. And the translation is away from literal. That's the benefit of human translations versus computer. The role of translation is to transfer meaning from one language to another, consider cultural biases, nuances, and performance. A translator job is to produce an accurate, neutral-sounding translation, reads as if they were originally written in the target language. Abilities, vocabulary, syntax, and idioms. Subject matter, cultural awareness, sensitivity. to assure that translation is appropriate for the target audience, ability to use computer, and so on. This is again the role and how translators do their job. Again, translators write the text. I took this from praise.com blog post translation. You can read the entire segment there. What about translators based on code of ethics should have autonomy to make translation-based decisions? The clients may submit general guidelines, expectation to assure translators are fit for their purposes, but they should not limit the translator's freedom regarding how they approach the translation. Well, in reality, some companies intentionally delete or remove the cultural clarification and annotations in order to reduce the payments of translators, because translators are paid per word. There is no code of ethics that companies should follow in respecting the originality of the translation job. So this is coercing the professionalism and of the translated documents in medical field. What is cultural bias? Prejudice. A cultural bias is tendency to interpret a word or an action according to culturally derived meaning assigned to it. It comes from cultural variation. This is by sciencedirect.com. And quite possible that another can interpret friendly smile on one part of the world as a person as disingenuous and inappropriate. So you see how cultural bias can change the meaning of the same thing. Cultural bias is the interpretation of situations, action, and data based on one's standards of one's own culture. That cultural influence can be based, including linguistic, ethical concepts of wrong, right, facts, or evidence-based proof, intentional or unintentional racial bias, religious beliefs, and sexual attraction and mating. Then including science like psychology, economics, anthropology, sociology, that seek to identify the cultural differences and their different researches to interpret the data of that differences. This is cultural bias based by masterclass.com, understanding the cultural bias. You can read the entire article there. But I believe we get a glimpse of what is it. So cultural bias is giving a name or significance to something based on where we come from, smiling, and so on. Cultural bias in translation. The translator must consider biases when they are make linguistic choices. Every single linguistic choices is saturated in culture, which means cultural awareness is also inseparable from ethical principle of accuracy and impartiality. We cannot be accurate and respectful for diversity without being culturally aware. So the conflict is that if translator translates, for example, I'm going to give you example for chord, not for chord, which notes have typos. So on the rule of the accuracy, interpreter have to do exactly the same. The message in English have to consist typos to keep the originality of the message. But this is perceived as interpreter ignorance and lack of knowledge because the providers are not trained of these practices of accuracy. Cultural awareness goes beyond geographical concept, ontological natural culture, having practical knowledge of the unique mix of belief, custom, social norms, and different cultures, the people whose language they speak and translate from. The culture of the author of the text, as well as the context of each individual, rather than translation, the idioms, the metaphors that have to reflect the unique aspects of cultural identity. All of these practices that we read so far, they all had one cultural prejudice together, all of them, which is interpreters' lack of cultural knowledge. The interpreters experience different cultures as such. Life experiences thus have cultural awareness compared, they have more cultural awareness compared to medical staff or people who know only one culture. But it's not possible to transmit the knowledge to the doctor during the interpreting session. The medical staff has never lived in different culture and is very challenging to open the medical staff brains and pour this knowledge about different cultures, especially if this is perceived as interpreter being intrusive and violating boundaries. Cultural thinking and critical thinking is a concept that has evolved over. Like culture can be defined many ways. Ability to effectively analyze information and form a judgment. To think critically, you must be aware of your own biases and assumptions when encountering information. And the other practices based on this standard include confidentiality, impartiality, professional conduct, professional development, representation of qualifications. In legal translation, if the original document has abbreviations and slang expression, the translator shall do the same. Annotate the slang or idiomatic expression meaning in the footnotes. If the translator puts only the abbreviation and create exactly 3 rows of the translated document, this will make no sense in English and will not be understood by anyone who read that note. The slang words do not exist in English, for example, as such the translator must leave them as original and explain briefly the meaning in the footnotes. The different length of the 2 messages often confuses and gives the impression that the translator did an error or terrible job because there is no trainings about that. But we're changing this, you and me, guys. Culturally thinking, accuracy, the ethical translator, faithful. So we are again continuing about the standards of being accuracy fully conveys the meaning without adding, omitting, summarizing, or changing anything. The translator should translate handwritten notes, including anything that are made by. Translator conveys the same register, tone, intent using equivalent legal terminology or slang or metaphoric expression. The same register is maintained and the same warm tone. In legal documentation, if the original document have abbreviation and slang expressions, the same, the translator have to put it in the footnotes. Often the slang words do not exist in the target language. For example, in English, the different length of the 2 messages can confuse and brings the provider to believe the translator did an error or a bad job. Hey guys, we are continuing this journey about cultural awareness. And right now, you and me are going to talk about religion and culture. How interesting is that? How fascinating is that you're learning with me about religion and culture and how religion or Christianity, Muslimanity, Hindu, or China or no religion can impact human beliefs. I'm going to talk about Christianity. I know, and you should know, not every person who is Christian is exactly the same. Once again, it's individual, but we're going to talk about general lines about people who are Christian, and particularly in America is Orthodox Christian, that will have this extremely judgmental beliefs. Oh, I'm scared that I'm going to destroy my background. All right. It seems like it's stable now. Okay. So the holy book for Christianity is called the Bible. The holy place is church. Inside of the church, icons represent God, and this is a simple icon here on the left side. The symbol is cross. worship to Jesus, Holy Trinity, or Ave Maria, or Mother of the Jesus. There is different separation of that. I'm not gonna go in detail. I'm just gonna talk about the Christianity in general. Religion is called Christian. The symbol is the cross with the Jesus on it. So males are perceived to be higher or closer to God. In every Christian church or community, men serve as a priest. There is no such a thing as a female priest. I'm apologizing. The heat is not working in my house and it's October. It's a little bit cold, but we're gonna make this work. Women are only permitted to serve as a nuns. If they want to be like a monk or a nun, it's okay in the cathedral, but they are not perceived or not allowed to be a priest or perform the mass. So we have a male supremacy here. The Christian faith uses icon extensively in a various way. For example, during prayers, veneration, people kiss, touch, adorn icons with candles and incense. Worship uses icons to help focus on divine and facilitate worship. A religious education can utilize icons to enhance faith and impact knowledge. People see icon as a declaration of faith, prayer, in their homes. Icons are representation of religious figures as Jesus Christ, Virgin Mary, saints, and are believed a direct connection to be sacred. It's important to dress modesty in the church and society. It is good to be covered, especially in a strict Orthodox churches. Men can wear shorts or shirts or similar. Long clothes to cover the skin is must. Especially in the monasteries in Eastern Europe as well, you cannot enter with shorts inside of the monastery. Women should cover their hairs or faces with a scarf during the mass. I'm going to show you how. If you don't cover exactly, and this is why they cover, it's like this. It's similar to the Muslim burqa. You wear this, you cover. And if you enter the churches, the Orthodox churches, for example, Eastern Europe, some Slovenian, Slovakian countries, even in Russia, there is somebody that will give you a scarf to cover your head and basically majority of your face, not to seduce males. There is different reasons why, but just to present modesty. And this is a good Christian to drawing attention from men's. The church rules is to wear proper attire in a God house, silence your mobile device, sit with your legs uncrossed, refrain from chewing gums, mints or candy, remove lipsticks. Of course, red lipsticks is absolute taboo and makeup as well. And also to avoid staining the icons and goddess items. Follow priest's instructions, sitting, standing, and in Italy, for example, they make you go down on your knees, which is very strange. I believe they do the same thing here in America. This is a religion. This is what is appropriate. Talking to the opposite sex, yes. In social setting, yes. However, in the church is no. Christianity and women. So now we're gonna start to understand why in cultures where we are Christians, patriarchat is must. Women are viewed as a source of sin. In the Bible, it's the Eve that brings the apple, which represents the sin to Adam and brings him to sin. Discuss sexuality and sex for the Christian religion is no. It's not okay. This is taboo, but it's not as taboo as in the Muslim culture, which we're gonna see shortly. Christianity has traditionally regarded the male homosexual behavior as immoral practice of sinful, and most major Christian movements hold view of that. I see that that's the statistic from Wikipedia and Google. The Christian religion considers homosexuality, bisexuality, asexuality, lesbian, and anything in between to be sinful and unacceptable. there is a typo on the word taboo. This is taboo and is forbidden to talk about. Talking about sex and sexual education is taboo, is not culturally acceptable in the family. Rarely modern upper family educate their children about biology, sexuality, and concerns around sexuality. There are many pedophile priests in Catholic Orthodox churches, but it's forbidden to discuss them because it is a sin to even talk about this. In Russia, there are a law forbidding people to be gay, and gay people are legally persecuted in Russia. A married couple sexuality is acceptable and must be virgin. Yes, nowadays in modern society there is less strict rules, but many cultures with Christian predominance and especially small population, being virgin is a virtue and is very important. It is a common denial of a sexual need, demonization and judgment of sexuality. In a modern countries, this is not acceptable. But fast industrialization, modernization brings modern belief as well. For males, being virgin is not a virtue and is never discussed. Males are never virgin, usually before marriage. Talking about sexuality is not acceptable. It's better to deny this part of you until you're married and never discuss it. Women and men do pray together. Males hold higher status than men, than a woman, and a woman are the only ones who participate and receive the blessings that God bestows upon men. So the males are above the females. One thing about Christianity and sexuality is that Christianity considers sexuality sin until you marry in church and you pay certain amounts of money. We can talk about religion and money, but I don't want to make this training extremely long. But Christianity accepts sexuality in couple only after married. If you're not married and you do it with your partner, you're considered to be a most sinful and you have to go and confess in church. And especially in Italy, there is places you can confess your sins, particularly related to sexuality. Even touching yourself or anything related to sexual desire is extremely judged. On the other hand, I never had to confess in Eastern Europe because there is church, we're Catholic, but we don't confess. When I went to Italy to a specific group to confess, the priest was trying to touching me very inappropriate and suggesting that I am a sex worker and that my parents are pedophiles and different very uncomfortable things. So even though we want to qualify the Christian beliefs, there is very unhealthy people in this environment, especially because it's taboo to talk. It's shameful to admit anything related to that. Christianity and men's. Christian cultures allow men to serve as a priest and vessels of God's will, to interpret God's words during Mass and in daily life. For men, the culture allows more privileges than for a woman. Men is considered to be higher and closer to God. Gender roles, men do provide, women take care of the house. Abuse. Abuse, it's taboo. It's taboo anywhere that is Christian, but it's part of the culture in Christianity. So abuse of a woman and children is common. In modern country, abuse of a woman and children is common occurrences, yet taboo to discuss. Admitting this and fighting against it is shameful and inappropriate. It is taboo to discuss pedophilia, sexual abuse, and sensitive topic that will be judged by the Christianity or your Christian mate. It's normal to have male dominance and control over ladies. A lot of ladies are perceived as a brainless creature that needs somebody to tell them what to do. This is subconscious, of course. Verbal abuse, they say it's not okay, but it's common practice. Using S-word, shaming, bullying, sexually shaming, name-calling, derogatory languages are commonly used from people that have a religious background. For example, families socially shame women or sexually shame for the benefit of a males. Discussing anything related to sexuality is taboo and shameful. This is not considered abuse or fighting. So when I say it's not considered abuse, calling ladies is not calling names. Females are not considering abusing. This considered just fighting. Physical abuse is common. Talking about it is not acceptable. In a modern cities and society, it's not that men are not controlling. So people that are educated, once again, that have been to the university, that study physiology and understand that your sexual need has nothing to do with spirituality, and that if you want to believe in God, God creates a sexual being, you don't have to deny this. Probably doesn't struggle these judgments, but a lot of people who are coming from the Christian Orthodox background do have those limiting beliefs, cultural biases, and rules that they follow based on the religion. Now we're going to talk about Muslim culture. This is such an interesting culture. Holy book is Quran. Mehab is the holy place that is full with geographical and national ornaments. In Muslim, it's not considered that the God figures can be represented because it's so holy. That's why we use we use geographical and nature symbols to ornament the mehab. Worship is Muhammad or Allah. The prayers are 5 times a day. Muslim must put aside what they're doing and go and pray. Spiritual figure is muezzin. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this. I hope I made it. My apology if I did not. I don't mean to be culturally inappropriate. Muezzin in Islam is the official person who proclaims the call of prayer on Friday for the public worship in the middle of the special place 5 times a day at dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and nightfall. The Jews use trumpets to summon worshippers. The Christian use the bells for the church, and the Muslim use a human voice. If you go to the Muslim places in Bulgaria, there is something called the minaret. It's like a tower that is high, and a person would sing from the top, and there is going to be a square under it, which is going to make the voice echo and be heard very far away. In Muslim culture, as men, especially during Ramadan, which is the fasting period, I would like to clarify something about Ramadan. A lot of people think that Ramadan is in August. This is not correct. In different cultures and different countries, Ramadan falls in different months. Also, it's based on their calendar. Originally, when the Muhammad write the Quran, the Ramadan should have fell in the most hot month of the year, because during the Ramadan, it's forbidden to eat from sunset to sunrise. And also during Ramadan, people do not eat pork and certain things like this. So I believe the Ramadan has a very beneficiary, how to say, for the health of the people. So imagine it's 45 and you eat pork, how bad you would feel, or drink alcohol or stuff like that. So Ramadan is also 1 month of purification, connection with God. It's a very deep fasting. I have read the Quran myself, although I'm a Christian. I know a lot about it. I just want to let you know, guys, that Ramadan is not simply fasting. It's a spiritual purification. So I'm going to continue reading here. During the Ramadan, for males, it's not allowed to watch and cannot be touched by female or talk to her because it's considered haram. Haram from Muslim means sin. Haram is the word from Palestine, but there is a different word that you could hear that it means that something should not be done. In Muslim culture, discussing sex and watching movies where people kiss is considered sin, for which Allah will punish you. Whoever witnesses a kiss in a movie is considered to be sin. During Ramadan, looking at a woman is considered extremely wrongful and will result in punishment from God. Women should cover themselves in a black or look down. It is not acceptable to look at your man, talk on even, give goodbye hug. It's wrong. Talking to the opposite sex, it's taboo. You cannot talk to men, greet, or sit close to other men. This is perceived as if you're looking for sex or you're in a level of a sexual worker. It is not okay to talk to anyone from the opposite sex. If a male from a Muslim background is cursing or using words as F, this is perceived as an attempt to turn the woman on and make her feel hot and horny, which is considered bad and a bad representation of the Islam. But if you hear someone from this culture cursing, this is the reason why. Enmeshment is typical for this culture. Enmeshment means lack of boundaries between people. There is no personal boundaries in family and relationship. Males are superior and women are, in order to be considered good, are expected to obey and serve men. Enmeshment is concept that describe relationship where people have unclear or permeable boundaries and emotionally entitled with each other. There is no autonomy, personal opinions, emotion, financial or social independence. Females have to agree to everything the man says. Muslim culture for women. Muslim culture, a man must wash his face and body more than 100 times after sexual encounter and pray for forgiveness. Women are considered dirty and physically incarnation of wrongfulness, Satan, devil, and sin. Sexuality and sexual conversation are considered taboo. If you talk about it, decent Muslims should leave the room immediately. Wearing the hijab or burqa. This is the hijab, which is covering. I show a picture of full hijab, which is full covering. Some people just wear the top part, and in modern countries, they don't cover everything, but this is how a good Muslim should look like. This is must. If you do not cover, you perceive as a woman with a low moral values, like a sexual worker. Taking off the face covering and allowing another man to see your face is equal to cheating. If a woman is not fully covered, shoulder, face, legs, even in the hottest period of the year, she is perceived as a failure and a bad woman. So in a Muslim society, you don't do it because you love it, you do it for others. Muslim women are required to remain virgin until marriage. Men cannot talk or approach a Muslim girls. Women are not allowed in the mosques. Mosques are for men. Usually women do worship because male fear of the immoral between sexes and the immoral behaviors of females. To meet young people in a Muslim culture, they have to pretend to be with friends, family members, or social gatherings, where engage in activities as shopping or going for food or visiting places. However, girls are not allowed to go alone. They can secretly meet mates, but in order to do so, they need social friends, girls, or other families to cover them and make it happen, because in Muslim culture, having social female friends is crucial, and it prevents girls from simply going out. If you don't have social, you cannot go out. Girls cannot leave, walk, shop, or be alone. They can go out with brother, cousins, other girls, other ladies, or family friends. It's not culturally appropriate to girls to wander alone or go out. For Muslim culture, lying and being dishonest about whereabouts is natural. Honesty is not a value in Muslim culture. Is it imperative to constantly lie about one's identity and location in order to maintain a good Muslim image? Being dishonest is natural and normal and necessary. Women and men pray separately. Muslim culture for men. Of course, men have more privileges than women. Men is considered to be higher and closer to God. Men are rarely or never considered to be wrong or responsible for anything. Ladies are to be blamed as males are donated with godly blessings and power. In Muslim culture, men never apologize to women or children, men are always right. Every woman's actions request a man consent. This is culturally strict. A man must give you the food on the table. And when I say this, I mean physically give it to you. You can't just sit and eat. It's extremely disrespectful and inappropriate. Woman cannot start eat without a man. I'm talking about more modern families. Let's say I'm talking about Palestine. I have a very close friend from Palestine. The father have to break physically the food with their hands and put it on your plate. You cannot eat before that. And this is also happening a lot in very Orthodox families. So the men's make all the decision. This is for the Muslims who are more open than eat together with females, because in a lot of Muslim countries, men's and women's do not eat together. This is taboo. As I said, they have a separate parts of the house, separate. Women's cater to men's. They do separate things. Also, if you see they're like celebrating men's eat, they have females who serve the food and beverages, and they also have females who dance for them. So women are strictly to serve the man. Woman must wait for men to finish eating before indicate for them that it's okay to do so. So in very strict Muslim, men eat first, then allow the female to eat. If the food is considered bad, men can throw it, kick the table, and so on. Males feel like a goddess power to judge, aggressor, scream, and so on, abuse. A man has the right to hit, beat, there is a typo here, I'm apologizing, beat, slap, punish women and children for disobedience, wrongful talking, thinking, eating poorly, looking bad, or any other behavior that the man deems inappropriate. In Muslim culture, men do not consider beating, hitting, raping, or abusing women as wrong. This is their expression of love and care, and women should be grateful if a man can correct them and bring them closer to Allah. Not every Muslim man is abusive, but I will tell you 99% and 99% and 99 and even more, it's considered a norm. The Quran states that the woman's happiness lies beneath the sole of a male's shoes. A man must control, order, govern everything a woman does, says, wear, and is. Woman can dress modern clothes if only the male permits that. So you see how Muslim culture is. Now we're going to talk about Hindu religion, holy book, Bhagavad Gita, holy place, temple. Worship is called puja, that venerates different gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Ganesha, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Trimurti, three main Hindu gods. Spiritual figure is priest, pujari, Hindu priest. A Hindu priest performs worship services referred to as puja, which includes ceremoniation, rituals, reading books, singing. Most important ritual is called Kavati Atam, which means the burden of dance, is ceremonial sacrifices and offering practiced by devotees during the worship of Murugan, the Hindu god of war. Is it a general part of festival in Taipusam? I'm sorry, guys, Taipusam, and emphasize depth bondage. The kavati, which is the burden itself, is a physical burden, the bearing of which is used by the devotee to implore Murugan for assistance, usually on behalf of loved one who is in need of healing or as a means of balancing and spiritual depth. So this is what the Google says about Kavati, guys. I am gonna go ahead and explain you a little bit about this tradition. It's a special tradition that includes flowers, fire, prayers, and extreme goddess devotion that is called bhakti. Bhakti means self-harming or self-punishing. So kavati means burden. During this tradition, everybody will decide what kind of burden they want to carry. Some women put some like metal parts in the nose and hang something. Some other care pots of water. Some cares some fruits. Some care something else. So the burden is what a person accepts to willingly care during this tradition or during this ritual in order to make God help you. So it's like something that you willingly accept to do for the duration of this ritual. I have done some of those kavati rituals. Some of them ask to roll to the ground. This is very strange experience. I just did it for the experience, if you want to believe. I've been to few of those kavati festivals, if I can call it festival. This is a religion worship. During this worship, you could see people hanging on hooks, hurting each other, burning each other, and other things as a devotion or gift to God. It's also strongly hypnotizing. It's a very, very interesting experience. Okay, that's about kavati. Males from the highest caste of Brahmins are considered blessed and able to cure illnesses and health issues. Men's poses and a goddess-like power and hold domination position in both family and society. The puja is the ritual, Hindu worship ritual that involves offering prayers, songs, and other forms of reverence to deity spirits and other aspects of the divine. The word puja comes from the Dravidian word pu, which means flower. That's why they use a lot of flower during this tradition. They use flowers, water or holy water, and fire. Devotion is offering flowers to deities, a symbol of gestures of devotee devotion, surrender to the divine, and desire to transcend mortality. So talking or interacting with the opposite sex can be challenging. There is separation even in religious gatherings, such as blessing at the temple. Males are on one side, females on the other side. Usually women are on the side of the goddess and the men on the other side, where is the priest. Separate eating and separate social meetups, women with women and men with men. So these parts that I described below about talking and interactions, even in Canada, where I have assisted the kavati traditions of Hindu religion, these traditions are imposed there. Puja is the ritual where the Brahmin would pray like Om Namah Shivaya prayer and will do special ritual to different gods. In Hindu religion, there are different gods, one for every day of the week. They're related to cosmos, and if you read more, it's extremely interesting and it's extremely profound beliefs. Also, at the Hindu temple, you have to take your shoes off before you enter, otherwise you consider it disrespectful even in the winter. And the hygiene is not something that is prized in Hindu religion. Hygiene is not something that is followed there. Hindu culture and women's. Before I read what I write here, I like to let you know that if you see Hindu, you see all these dots on the ladies. There is different reason for these dots, and different dots have different colors. For example, if you go to the temple and you do Vishnu or some specific god puja, which is a prayer ritual where in the end you get blessed and forgiven and you do really feel something special, at least I did. In the end, the priest will put a dot. The dot is symbol that you were purified and connected with God. And it's a beautiful thing. It's done with a special henna, which obviously fell away after you shower. The second reason why the females have a dot and a lot of them have a tattoo right here is because it means that she is taken. She is married. That's the second reason. Let's talk about wearing sari is a cultural practice in India that values modesty and grace. Sorry, there is a repetition here. It is essential to maintain sari decorum, and respect when wearing sari, especially social gathering, form events. Ensure that sari is draped in a way that covers the midfulness and that blows well fitted in, not overly revealing. We're talking about the blows that it goes under the sari, the red one. It have to be tied so you cannot see under it. You don't have to see the underwear, otherwise you're considered not very morally adequate. Avoid any gestures of movement that may compromise the modesty of the ensemble. There is a classes on how to walk and how to wear sari properly. The only covered parts are the waistline and the hands, as you can see, and the face. Everything must be covered. If in the temple, women must be covered down to the ankle. The top parts are covered the entire body and also the head and the hair. So if you see this covering on the face, usually when they go inside of the temple, they also cover the head and the neck with the top part of the sari to show modesty and grace. It must be covered. If at any part the knees are visible, this is considered the woman's lack of morals. Sexuality is taboo. I'm sorry, there is a typo. Sexuality is a taboo topic and not something you can talk about, not with parents, not with opposite sex. Women having periods are not allowed to the temple and considered dirty and impure. Women must be virgin until marriage. Usually this is combined marriage and the family chooses the girl for the man. The man must obey to parents' choices. The girls and the boys can meet only after their parents have met, exchange gifts, usually coming from the male parts, flowers, sweets, gold, valuables, and money. And the young people can start meeting if it's approved by the parents. If it's not customary to meet and have a girlfriend, the parents make arrangements and males obey and start engagement period that allow them to meet the lady before they marry each other. In India, they must marry and have children by the age of 32 for males, and ladies, of course, are always younger. Ladies earlier. Otherwise, it's considered failure in life, and this is not only in the family itself, but also society pressure people to marry before 32. Woman's role in the family is to cook, clean, eat, serve the meals, sorry, and take care of the children. During the puja, the religion rituals, woman's role is to prepare the food that will be blessed and share it. A role of nourishing and preparing the best for the goddess. It's so not knowing to cook is not okay. Hindu for males. In Hinduism, males have traditionally been expected to support the family. Males are breadwinners with the families. They are expected to work and be providers for the loved ones. Lead religious rituals. Before I read this section, I like to know, guys, we still have castes in Hinduism. I believe there are 7. It's a long time I haven't read about it. But castes in India, if you're born in a certain caste, you can do just certain profession. For example, if you're a Brahmin, you can be a priest and bless people. If you're born in certain castes, you do certain jobs. Lower the caste, higher the jobs. And you're born, harder the jobs, you're born in the caste, you cannot change that. This is for life. So this is how the culture and the spiritual belief are really powerful. Men are only allowed to read religion or Vedic rituals in mandirs. Mandirs is this. Usually the top parts of the body is uncovered and lower look like a dress. I did not put it here because it's gonna go on YouTube, or I want to be culturally sensitive for people who feel embarrassed by the top parts of male's body. Men's and Brahmins are considered to have no ego and equalized to God with healing and blessing powers. Men's command and ladies' power. Performs funerals, rituals. Only sons could perform these rituals in Shraddha. In Hindu mythology, men are typically seen as embodying the mind, while woman embodying the matter. For example, creator of the world is Brahma and preserve of the world is Vishnu, and the distorter of the world is Shiva, and three are male deities. So we have the main goddess, which are male, and we have deity, divinity, which are females, but they're, of course, below the males. Inherit family property, sons inherit the family property. Gender roles are traditional. They say 62 adults say that both men and women works, but usually the females take care of children, cook, and do traditional patriarchate, basically. I have never seen Indian to clean. As I said, cleaning is not something that is considered very important in this culture, and females also are not very into cleaning. The reason why is because cleaning is considered lowly or dirty or something like that. It's just considered bad. Men's will never clean. But if you clean the sculptures of goddess called murtis, is considered that gods will bless you if you clean them, which is very interesting because of they are not cleaning at all. If they clean the, I think this is very interesting cultural belief in nested because of the lack of cleaning. So if you clean, you see these temple structures there. I did not know that this is considered blessing. So I was working in this temple as a volunteer, and the priest will tell me what needs to be done, and I would clean them. And then I noticed Indian people were not very happy. And then I was informed that it's considered blessing. So if I clean the sculpture, I got the blessings. So, and I was surprised that first time in my work at the temple, they tried to help me. And then they told me that the help was because it's considered that I'm gonna get the blessing all alone, which is very interesting. Women do not have any spiritual powers or roles in religion except as participation during the blessings or the puja. Enmeshment or lack of boundaries in some degree, some boundaries exist and must be respected. However, strictly gender roles must be followed. Sorry, guys. So about the Hindu religion, very, very interesting. Females cannot lead any rituals. They're not close to God, and they do not have spiritual power. If you read the Hindu, I have read Bhagavad Gita. Again, females are considered as a sin and dirty and whatnot. So a little bit more open than Muslim culture, but still very strong separation and boundaries. And now we're going to talk about China. Yes, guys, the reason that I put this country here and this setting of this training is because China is considered to have no religion, and Chinese people are extremely material. They are no religion, or 9% of Chinese people are Buddhist or any other gods that serves you. But Chinese believe in superstitions and many. Money are the highest virtue in society and life. Chinese political system considered authoritarian, but is ex-communist country, so everything is extremely based on dictator. Although the government state that China is socialist democracy and people's democratic dictatorship. So democratic dictatorship, this is very interesting. Ancient beliefs about Confucianism or Confuci, the family is the most important social unit, and relationship with the family are the fundamental for every other relationship. The ultimate God is achieved perfection. Cosmic harmony means that the person's moral character can affect the world around them. So you're responsible for the world around you. It can guide personal life even if they are perceive other religions such as Taoism and Buddhism. Disagreeing in China is absolute taboo. There is a typo in the word taboo. I'm apologizing. It's okay. So in China, it's not acceptable to say no, even if the person does not want anything. They cannot declare it. It's absolutely not possible. For example, there is a social media called WeChat that has no confirmation if the message has been received or not, because if the person reads it, they must respond, and also they must agree to any request. So how uncomfortable is that you have to be a yes man all the time? When Chinese person is not okay with doing something, they can find excuses. My head, my stomach, my belly hurts me, and I am at work. I can't do, I'm helping my mother, and so on. Every possible excuse can be used until the person start ignoring the other part. If it's confronted to say, sorry, I did not see. So avoidance is the best way when Chinese or Asian people say no, because in the culture, people must obey, especially females, or obey to higher powers, obviously. Curse, there is not culturally appropriate to curse in China. It's not acceptable to use offensive words on formal settings with family or anything like that. Another taboo is I love you. You never say I love you. Maybe you could hear it once in a lifetime with something very unusual and unaccepted. Young people say yes to parents and to children. Young people between each other say I love you, but parents, children never. Cold abuse is typical toxic, silent treatment, ignore, neglect, avoid, because we cannot say no in China. If someone says something hurtful, it's norm to avoid. Never talk, never clear and solve the matter. Wait long enough until everybody is forgotten. Giving instructions to the doctor is absolute taboo. I know there is a typo. My apology for the typos, guys. Woman after the revolution started working, they work and have a house, chores, and so on as addition. This is after the revolution, the communist working, the communist influence. The abuse is practical mindset, especially from males towards the females, from parents toward the children. There was a recent scandal on the TV talking about a woman held on a chain by a man who purchased her as a bride. And the woman obviously was shamed, described as insane. And while she was being on chain, she had 5 children from this man, and he was uplifted to the level of hero that took care of an insane woman. Obviously, the lady got insane being kept in chain. Or human trafficking is part of bridal market. I'm going to talk a little bit shortly about the bridal market. Verbal abuse is part of the culture. In a formal setting, of course, you cannot dare ever to scream the doctor, but the doctor can humiliate you and aggressor you. This is part of the culture. Men towards women also as well, people also, adults towards younger children, parents relative towards younger as well. This process include, okay, so people who consider themselves to be lower in the status must demonstrate utmost sorrow, including on going down on the knees and begs for forgiveness. This process includes self-offending, self-humiliating, slapping oneself in the face, and calling oneself stupid. Then make compliments to the other person who is above you, how amazing, kind, generous they are, and ask for forgiveness. Parents offending and abusing children is the norm. The parents are considered the wonders of the children, the owners. I'm sorry, you see how the computer switched that because it's culturally inappropriate in America. The parents are considered to be owners of the children, and slapping and verbally abusing them is part of the culture. Physical abuse, it's a norm. Men do abuse women and children. 53% beating children, only 7 go to the police. The fear of staying at record. I will explain you this portion. So children must obey to parents and females have to obey to males. So everything else is abusing you. If a woman that is abused by the husband go ahead and file a police record, she's going to stain her record and the record of the child. So If the child want to study in specific university or want to get certain profession, cannot, because the mother complain about the male's abuse. Saying that the abuse is 100% in China. If you have speaking with somebody from China, they do slap each other in the face and call each other stupid. I study with Chinese people coming from China in Italy, and this is 100% true. I prepare these materials watching a Russian Chinese girl talking about this. Her name is Shankana. You can find her YouTube channel. She speaks in Russian. If you do speak Russian, she talks a lot about those things, which is very interesting. There are many videos there that you can watch, but I also put my personal input there. The statistics are by Google about the percentage of the abuse, but there is 100% abuse towards females and children. It's rarely to find someone who has not had any form and shape of abuse. Bridal market. In China, parents do look for bride in a special market where each parent has the slogan about the candidate's most important characteristic, salary, owning car, apartment, and so on. Bride's prices can start between 3 up to 30 times of annual salary. Bridal markets are also normally to look for both parts, and the parents look to find brides for their children. Gender roles, man is provider. I want to talk a little bit about the women in China and Sao Tiao. I'm apologizing if I don't pronounce this correctly. Women in China must act like little children, manipulating their elderly, including crying and making faces, act clumsy if they need help with housework or if they want the male to do it. The art of Sao Tiao, it's an art to how to cry, imitate the voice of a child, say you can't do something, say your hands are too little to wash a cup, say everyone else had this bag except me. It's basically manipulative tactics on how to ask for things you want, but without asking directly, which includes self-humiliation, put the other party on pedestal with compliments and underline your dependency on their help and mercy. The main manipulation is to show the other party that they have power over you, how helpless and dependent you are. This is a wonderful woman. The correct woman is silent, obedient, domable, sacrifice herself caring for the children, household, and family and parents. Self-sacrifice is best for females in China culture. Modesty, repression, and self-sacrifice are the value. When I talk about Cao Tiao, I want you guys to understand that you cannot simply ask the boyfriend to buy you a bag. So what Cao Tiao is, and this is in every setting at work and everywhere else, it's how to cry about it. For example, everybody have the bag except me, my friends, my neighbor, and oh my goodness, you're so strong, I'm so dependable. So this is somehow like a child tantrum is extremely prized in China culture. Talking about sex is taboo. Sex is considered impure. Women must look and act like little girls. The cultural tendency is accepting pedophilia as a norm. Girl must be pale, skinny, infantile, and act like a little children and speak with voices as a little children. Sexualizing of a children is tolerated. It's taboo to talk about it, never admitted. This will make person record stain for life, difficult to, and so on. Sex is the most dangerous enemy of the society. Women wear too tight clothes or dress, they can be arrested. Sex with 3 people is an orgy, and the person can be arrested and spend 3 years in jail. To offer sex services, men receive administrative fines. If a person watches adult movies, is okay if they do it alone, but if it's saved on their device, it's hard to prove that they have not divulged. To divulge pornography, it's crime. Can wash the socks and underwear together because of some strange religious beliefs or some strange cultural thing. The skin must be white, otherwise not beautiful. Must be covered like a Muslim, hide from the sun, more pale, more skinny, more beautiful. There is lack of boundaries in Chinese culture, no individual boundaries of separation. The entire society is considered to be a big family. The politicians are mother and father, Tiao. The bosses of the company is also, if it's a female, have motherly roles. No personal space. You must visit relatives and they ask you question about your personal life. Are you married? If you're married, are And now, guys, we're gonna talk about what is culturally appropriate in your culture. This is a survey-based training that I prepare based on questions, about 30 questions. What is appropriate in your culture? We're going to talk about Costa Rica, Mexico, Venezuela, Italy, Russia, Norway, Denmark, Switzerland, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Serbia, Slavic countries, Georgia, and American culture versus other cultures. What is appropriate? Let's start with Costa Rica. Okay, let me see. Yeah, okay. I believe that the slides have been misorganized, so I'm gonna try to organize them. Just give me a second. All right, here you go. It doesn't matter. If it's organized the way I am organized, it's okay, guys. I'm kind of perfectionist. So I want to organize it based on the way I ask the questions. Is it appropriate? So the reason that I ask these questions to this culture is because here in America, if we disagree, if we curse, if we give instructions to the doctor, if we speak loudly, and all that is considered not appropriate, is resented, and I ask other cultures if that's appropriate for them. Number one, disagree with the doctor in Costa Rica is not a practice. Naturally, to obey what the doctors say. You can disagree, but usually it's okay when there is some serious error the doctor did to harm you. Obey if the doctor asks you to do flu, COVID vaccine, tetanus, polio, and all other vaccines. People obey and agree with the doctor naturally because the doctors are perceived as authority. They only disagree if the doctor did something wrong. Curse around the doctor is absolute taboo. Nobody curses, neither doctor nor patients. I'm sorry about the typos, guys. Being on time is an absolute yes. Both parties are on time. If not, their perceived lack of professionalism, lack of care. Patient can do a delay, sometimes 15, 20 minutes, which is accepted, but not tolerable. Patient are, if there is no appointment, patient are not charged. Jokes and compliments at the doctor office. Everything is formal. Compliments are okay, but should not be sexually orientated or body oriented. Compliments about being good medical provider are more natural. Speaking loudly if there is an accent is not okay. It's a form of aggression and rudeness. Dress up at the doctor's office is not a custom. Enmeshment is present, which means no separation between parents. There is no individual separation. You have to obey, agree to elderly, and so on. Costa Rica, sexuality and sexual interaction. It's not common to talk about sex. Sexual talk in the family is absolute taboo, even in the same sex. It's culturally not acceptable to talk with the elderly or family members or relatives. Joking about sexuality is a no. Sexual education one time a year, one time lifetime for 1 hour. Girls must be sane, modest, and modesty because of the Christian predominance religion influence. If woman is pregnant, must wear specific clothes. It's taboo and negative perceived to have silicone, fillers, breast implants, BBL, as comparisons with Brasilia, which is considered extremely beautiful and attractive. There is a prejudice toward people who are divorced. It seems like negative sign of failure, bad for males and females. Clothes, it isn't common to dress up for doctors. Dress up sexy, it's okay. Short skirt, cleavage, and dresses. Abuse, In the culture, is it common to interact through verbal abuse, name calling, screaming? It's part of the conflict or couples fight. Both sides can do some abuse, such as slapping. Some men beat or hit their partner, which is part of the culture. Earning money or gender roles, males should be a breadwinner. However, there is new tendency of females work and they are in professional world. Mexico survey-based. Disagree with the doctor is not culturally acceptable. The doctors ask you to do something, you do it. Doctors are authority, you agree without hesitation. Main question is the cost of medical care, if you can afford it. You always say, yes, sure, doctor, but then you do not follow the instructions and do whatever you want. This is common practice. Natural remedies take part equally strong as going to the doctor, especially because doctor's visit cost more. Often people go first to the natural hero, especially if they cannot afford the doctor. Cursing. Doctors and patients use curse words, but they are not vulgar. They are part of the colorit of the language, way of communication and decompression. Doctors use it as a way to express worry or underline a condition. It is part of the communication, not a way to offend each other. Being on time is absolute. Yes, doctors are always on time, punctual, and this is part of being professional. If the doctor is not on time, it's negatively judged. Doctor not being there is very disrespectful. Not being on time is disrespectful. Some delays are acceptable for patients. Jokes and compliments is welcome, well perceived. If someone may compliments que lindo, which means how beautiful, it's not sexually perceived. In American culture, it's more useful form express gratitude for the medical. It's not sexually perceived as in the medical culture. It's more to say gratitude, how good is someone of being a doctor. Speaking loudly is okay. Patient get loud out of comfort, and also doctor get loud as well. Way of expression. Doctors speak loudly to calm patients and respond to their emotional levels. Dress up is part of the new age culture. In the small places, dressing up is not the part of this. Giving instruction to the doctor is absolutely unacceptable. This happens sometimes. Doctors say yes, but usually they do not follow instructions. The doctor is the authority and nobody can instruct the doctor. If you try, doctor can ignore it or can be offended. Gender roles are classical, Christian, males providers, females take care of the house. Mexican affirm if the family gathering, Mexicans stay separately. They insist it's because men talk about men's things and females talk about females' things. Abuse is taboo to talk about. Machismo is a very strongly developed, is like a misogynist in English, I believe the word. Men's hit, offend, and abuse women daily. It's taboo to talk about it. Sexual abuse is absolute taboo, and you will never talk about it. In Mexico, around 45% have experienced intimate partner violence, and furthermore, 76% physical abuse from partners never reported. Verbal abuse, scream, offensive word, women also scream and use vulgarity towards men, which is mutual or natural. But I repeat, people who are educated, emancipated, do not use words. Do not generalize. I'm talking about the typical classical Latino culture. Physical abuse is from males towards women and also from police towards citizens. There is lack of personal boundaries, culturally not acceptable to communicate or separate from the concept of family. This is cielo.org, Mexico. The website is in Spanish. You can find more information there if you like. Venezuela. Okay, Venezuelans and Argentinians like to pretend they're Italians and that they are so perfect and so educated. Let's see what Venezuela has to say. Disagree with the doctor is not culturally acceptable. There is no need to agree. However, doctor's office, you do not express your disagreement. You must avoid confrontation. If you disagree, just look for another opinion. Do not express it. The doctor is in pedestal. Cursing is not acceptable, but many Latin cultures say absolute no and then tend to use words. In Latin culture, use curse words or some slight profanity is okay, but at the doctor's office, they may be filtered, but using them is normal. Being on time, not heavy cursing, no profanity. Being on time is important. Patient must be punctual. Doctors, no. Patient always wait for the doctors. This is the norm. There is no appointment. Doctor can't charge for the visit. Jokes and compliments are always in direction to spirituality. God bless you. God bless you and your family. This shows the person gratitude that they're good Christian, social status, and manners to demonstrate one is a good person. Speaking loudly is not acceptable. Dressing up, yes, it's okay. They do. Giving instructions to the doctor is absolutely not acceptable. Gender roles, males providers, females take care of the house. Abuse any type is taboo to talk about it. People deny it. However, I noticed this more taboo is something to talk about, higher the abuse is. In fact, Venezuela struggles with that. People marry young and stay married young. So verbal abuse part of the cultural, sexual abuse is part of the culture, but usually females cannot say no to their partner. People marry young to show that they're good Christian. They deny abuse problems and blindly hope miracle will happen tomorrow. According to Amnesty International, national organization of Venezuela, estimate that women are abused by their partners every 15 minutes. It's very difficult to find exact statistic about violence against women because only 7% of the official complaints result in trials. There is very difficult. But as you can understand, more taboo is, more difficult is, more abuse is there. Italy, disagree with a doctor is not appropriate, not acceptable, unthinkable. If you do not agree, still you say that you agree and you look for a second opinion. It's absolute taboo to have different opinions or to disagree. You must obey and listen to everything the doctors say. Curse words are okay. For example, che cavolo, which mean cabbage. Cavolo is the cabbage, but literally this is an insult word that means that somebody is not very intelligent. Che cavolo c'hai nella testa, which means what do you have? What kind of cabbage do you have in your head? Literally, but this is slight insult and this is okay. It's used. Some people have less education coming from smaller places and use curse words to decompress, but it's not cursing at the doctor, it's form of a self-expression. Being on time, absolute yes. Each party is on time with plus minus of 5 minutes. Some rare occasions, doctor can be late if they had surgery or emergency, but this is very, very rarely. If a person show up at the hospital with no appointment, yes, they can late. They can wait. Jokes and compliments, yes, from both parties. This decompression, trust, familiarity with the doctors. Nothing vulgar. Speaking loudly is not okay. The shame is part of the culture. The shame of going to certain doctor is natural. In the culture, everyone keep quiet, low tone. So speaking loudly, it's not okay. The doctors is more common to shout or be loud because they feel as authority. But in Italy, they have some cases where, especially in Napoli or Sud, where the patient will attack and physically aggressor or batter the doctors for bad practices considered by the patients. This happens. Dress up, yes. We dress up in Italy. This is must. Otherwise, you cannot show up out. Instructions to the doctor, absolute taboo, absolutely not. It's not appropriate to suggest anything to the doctor whatsoever, not even if you're an interpreter. Gender roles are classical. Males provide, women take care of the house. On the south of Italy, on the north of Italy, you can find people working, female working, but usually is more just for fun, if you want to call it. And if you want to look for work, the male have to help you. There is something called nepotismo. You can find a work if you know someone. Otherwise, you probably will be underpaid. Taboo to talk about abuse. Abuse from men towards women are naturally happening. Verbal abuse, yes. But if you refuse to do something for Italian men or some sexual advances, you normally will be called names. The same thing happened here in America. I don't know why is that. You guys can clarify in the comments below. Physical abuse is common practice, especially south of Italy. Beating girls, children, and females is normal. It happens a lot, and it's taboo to talk about it. Statistics show that abuse 31%, 13 of women being victims of physical, sexual abuse, 20%, 12% contacted the police. Salute.gov.it says that 30%, 40% think. So slap a partner in the face if she has flirted with another man is not considered abuse. 40% of men thinks that and 20% of women. 1 in every 3 Italians do not consider violence to force a partner to have sexual intercourse. 1 in 4 thinks that it cannot really be considered form of abuse to comment on physical abuse suffered by a woman by stating that it's less serious because her attitudes and clothing appearance communicated that she wanted it. Talking about sex and sexuality is taboo. Strong sexism discrimination. Being gay in Italy is absolute taboo and strongly judged. Sexuality is not discussed. Sex is sane. Shame and sin. Confess to the church. No sexual education at school ever. No questionnaires at the doctors related sexual partners are appropriate. And yes, there is some enmeshment, lack of boundaries, not acceptable to separate from the concept of family, especially in the South. Living with a mother for males of advanced age of 50 or 60 is the norm, and they say call it mama boys in Italy because of that. Russia. Disagree with the doctor is not acceptable. The doctors perceive as authority. With the doctor, you do agree to everything the doctor say, but do people do something else? Avoid conflict and confrontation. Curse. Doctor do not curse, but nurses, medical staff, yes, because of the lower payments. Naturally, if patients use alcohol, there is a typo. I could see it now. Or including the usual use profanity as a way of expression, especially if they are drunk. Educated people do not curse, but usually people use a lot of curse words or slang words. Being on time, it's must, but in Russia, patients have to be on time and doctors are always late. There is very little doctor staff and a lot of patients, so doctors are always on late, and because they have small salary, this is something to be excused. Using jokes or compliments is not appropriate unless humorous situations naturally happen. Speaking loudly is not acceptable. Dress up is important. Dressing up, special clothes, especially trademarks, is to show social status and authority. You must look your best in society. Absolutely inappropriate to give instruction to the doctor is inappropriate. This means person like basic manners, culture, how they are their villain, absolute no. Talking about sex, taboo. Talking about sexually boundaries, taboo. It's not okay. Not discussed in the family, not in society. Couples or man with man, woman with woman. If the doctor will ask the question, it will be very delicate. There would never be questions like, do you use toys? Do you do, and so on. This is very inappropriate. Classical gender roles. Abuse is norm in Russia. I'm so sorry to say that we have a law called Duma. I'm going to read it here. I got this portion from the Harvard Edu. Although I speak Russian and I know what this means, I don't want to bring a Russian for you guys that doesn't speak the language. In the 2017, legislative body discriminated domestic violence that not require hospital treatment. Under the law, if domestic violence leads to bruises or minor injuries, then there is no punishment for the offender. It's only when domestic violence causes such a severe injury that is sends the victim to the hospital, then it becomes a criminal act. So for Russian lady to receive physical abuse, verbal abuse, it's common and has no law and is part of the culture. Physical abuse, men beat women and children. Slapping in the face is not considered abuse. A lot of women do not complain if they're because they are financially dependent and have children that they cannot support. Strongly developed Stockholm syndrome between men and women. And yes, there is lack of boundaries. Norway, Denmark, Switzerland. Disagree with the doctor is taboo. Curse words are not acceptable. Yes, being on time. I would like to also clarify for you guys, Norway, Denmark, Switzerland, they do not have a vulgar words in their languages compared to Slavic countries. We have such a colorful cursing words, and there is some traditional food here, make me feel so hungry right now. If you go to the emergency room with no appointment, you're gonna wait. If you have an appointment, plus minus 5 minutes, you're gonna be accepted. Jokes and compliments are not accepted. Speaking loudly, absolutely not. Nobody dress up. Giving instructions to the doctors is absolute taboo. You cannot, because the doctor is above you. It's like a professor. Gender roles are less, how to say, patriarchal. Females work in Norway, Denmark, Switzerland are one of the most advanced countries worldwide, where education is free and females and males if we talk about equal roles, I could see it here more than in any other country. Verbal abuse is not acceptable. Being gay, lesbian may be not warmly accepted, but there are laws who protect people. You cannot bully, shame, or lack, or mock, or laugh on people for their sexual orientation. Physical abuse is taboo, of course, happen especially in the smaller places. Over 9% of the women have been subject of severe intimate partner violence. In Sweden is 46% violence, 13% higher, Denmark 52. So this is the Google search statistics. Usually the statistics are a little bit less. My friend is in Norway, the one that I interview. So of course it's taboo and it's less natural. Bulgaria, Macedonia, Serbia, and Slavic cultures and countries. Disagreeing with a doctor and disagreeing with the medical staff, it's appropriate. There is no pressure to do any procedures. Doctors politely explain why something is suggested and respect the patient decision. There is no pressure for vaccination or anything else. Cursing words are very common. Usually vulgar and vulgar words are not used at the doctor's office, but those languages as Italian, we do not have those languages, for example, Italian, English, Spanish. It's called Slavic colorit, and the words are used daily as a norm of expression, of familiarity, and being close to someone or trusting someone, make things spicy. Cursing does not mean sexual invitation or using anything related to sex. It's more experiencing strong emotion. It's a norm. Everywhere, in the street, in the family, at the doctor, part of the culture. Men show their toughness, virility when engaged with others using those type of colored words. Being on time is yes for both parties, doctors, providers. If the doctor is late, there is something wrong with the doctor. There is prejudice that is not a good doctor. If the doctor can't organize their time, they cannot be a good doctor. This is a cultural prejudice. Jokes and compliments, yes, both parties jokes. Nobody take the joke sexually. Here in America, everything is overly sexualized, sadly. Speaking loudly is okay, but not shouting as Americans shout. Usually American doctors are loud and the patient no. It's strange how doctors are loud here. If somebody have accent, not only doctors, restaurant, anywhere you go. For Bulgarian culture, this gives the impression that the doctor have mental deviations or something is wrong with them. It's not appropriate to speak extremely loud. The reason that I mention here, because in America, if somebody has an accent like me, people naturally start shouting at me. And this is very uncomfortable. Everybody have to dress up very close like to Italian culture. Give instructions to the doctor is absolute yes. The doctors listen, respect, and treat you as an important, precious things. The doctors are not superior. They're polite, educated, well-mannered, and explain each step while curing you. For example, the dentist explained to me what he do in my mouth and why. Mutual listening and respecting is part of the culture. Gender roles, religion could be Christian or Muslim. In Bulgaria, Poland, Macedonia, Serbia, Slavic cultures, men are providers, women cook and take care of children. Abuse is taboo to talk about. Verbal abuse is part of the colorit, for example, calling each other fagot or sisi or something like that. Is demonstrating intimacy, familiarity with someone, and confidence. Physical abuse is also common, but is taboo to talk about. Women must accept and live with that. Males fight with each other, often physically hitting or beating each other to solve a conflict. Yes, there is lack of personal boundaries. And we are continuing to talk about cultural awareness, guys. We just talked about the culture of Bulgaria or Eastern Europe and how and what is appropriate and what not in Eastern European countries. Let's talk about Georgia. I was very pleasantly surprised when I met someone and interviewed them for Georgia, because Georgia is a very interesting country. Not by accident, I put the map here. It's between Russia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and a Black Sea. So it's semi-European, semi-Asian country with a very mixed culture, very interesting. Georgia is a country at the intersection of Europe, Asia, Soviet Republic, and some Caucasian mountain villages and Black Sea beaches. They are Georgian, 86, Azeri, Armenian, Russian, and other cultures. Our religion is Orthodox Christian, 10% are Muslim, Armenian, Apostolic Christians are some different type. I got this information from ca.gov. Disagreeing with a doctor, it's normal for person to ask for more opinion before go to do procedures. Doctors are welcoming this. There is no reaction if patients like to educate themselves or visit more doctors. But there is no open disagreement in the conversation or interaction. Interactions with the doctor is subtle, and if the patient does, do not say it directly. It's more like exploring all the other options and asking for opinions. Curse is absolute taboo, culturally not acceptable. The doctors perceive as a professor, higher authority. However, if there is a malpractice, yes, you could see, for example, a death of a pregnant woman. This can cause people to curse even in the TV and whatnot to express their griefs. Usually, however, cursing is not okay. But a lot of interaction with males, they use derogatory languages, especially to put the women down and silence women. This is not using a form of like cursing. It's more like power over females, things that I notice. Being on time is usually absolute yes. Doctors are on time. They like to see patients. And one of the reasons why is because patients will give tips to the doctors in form of a cash for the good job. it's more like a tip, not a bribe. I mean, you can't bribe a doctor. Talking about bribery, Eastern Europe, it's bribery, it's very strong power. You bribe everyone and everything. Jokes and compliments, it's okay, but have to be delicate. Speaking loudly, it's okay. It's part of the culture, part of being emotional. However, screaming, it's not okay. Dress up, everybody dress up like in Italy. It's important to be presentable. This is very important. Instructions to the doctor is very inadequate. For example, interpreter should never instruct a doctor. Gender roles, Christian, Muslim, obviously, males providers, females stay at home. Talking about sexuality is taboo. Sex is not discussed among people. Christian Orthodox, usually in this part of the family, girls must be virgin, or if they have partners, is something you never talk about it. Being gay is taboo, is forbidden. Legally is not persecuted. However, society is very discriminatory about people who have different than the classical sexual interest. Abuse is taboo to talk about. Verbal abuse is not considered verbal abuse. Men will interrupt, speak with females, silence them, do not allow them to speak or say anything because they perceive females as a level below, if I could say that. Physical abuse is also common, but taboo to talk about. Personal boundaries, there is enmeshment and lack of boundaries. The males are the ones who talk and say what is done and how and have higher place in society, family, and overall. People with Orthodox background have very strong patriarchal foundation. Muslim background believe women are to be controlled and directed as they are inferior to males. America, let's talk about American culture. In American culture, disagreeing with the doctor, it's okay to have open dialogue, discuss different material, ask about the procedure, but disagree with the doctor is considered criticism, offending, doubting the competence, the status of the doctor. It's not appropriate because the doctor is authority. The doctor is on pedestal, the doctor knows better, it's rude to disagree. Americans are told there is a typo to agree, to obey, and do anything the doctor says, even if it's very uncomfortable. If patient refuse vaccines or suggestion is not warmly accepted, is looked like you're being rude. Person disagree is perceived as a person who is looking with the conflict to conflict with the doctor. The doctors are defensive, they pressure you, become loud, angry, and emotional because obedience is equalized to respect. This is for American culture. Other cultures, it's okay to have dialogue. Doctor is not authority, is not on pedestal. They're just humans. They can make mistakes. And more you inform yourself, it's better. It is not rude to disagree. Obedience to doctor, in some cultures, you can refuse to do things the doctor says. And they're okay with if you refuse vaccines and what's not. In America, they're very strong pressure to do it and say you may die, risks are higher, and so on. Disagree for a lot of other cultures does not mean conflict. It means a person choose something else than what the doctor suggests at the moment. In other cultures, it's okay to disagree. Doctors do not react. They not defend nor pressure. There is no emotional reaction or unpleasant feelings. Curse word at the doctor's office. Absolute taboo. Doctors is on pedestal. They are the authority. If they do it, it's okay. Patient using curse words is inappropriate. We have a double standard here because in American hip hop art, it's okay to use curse words. The doctor can use it, but patients, you're below, you cannot use it. So we have these very strange standards here. Other culture, curse is okay by the doctor, patient, and to some degree, I repeat again, nothing vulgar. Using words is a form of a cultural expression, interjectory, as we saw in the countries already, form to cool off, to express emotions, anger, hurt, upsetness, pain, discomfort, shame, humiliation, fear, stress, all of that. They are used from people also under influence of alcohol. Curse word slangs and some vulgar expression considered form of masculinity, leadership, domination, demonstration of power and superiority. In the streets, conflict, fights, verbal alteration or disagreement, a curse word means courage and readiness to fight the opponent physically. Using curse words happen. The important is to understand the patient does not curses at the doctor. They just use that words as a way expressing themselves. In other countries, curse words are not used at the music or art. Cultural of being on time. And once again, we have a double standard for America. Doctors can always be late and doctors are not punctual, and this is okay. Doctors never apologize for being late because they feel entitled, they feel on the higher level. Patient, it's never okay to be late. If patient is not on time, it's punished. Yes, we reschedule you. We charge you, we don't give you the service. Patients are not equally valuable as humans in America. Patients are often rescheduled, charged. It seems like patients in American society are not equally valuable as doctors because doctors work and do a lot of money and you do nothing because you're just a patient. In other countries, delay is okay for either party. One standards, doctor being late is not acceptable. This is not okay, especially European countries. For Swiss, Bulgaria, professionalism is equal to be on time. If you're not on time, doctor doesn't like me, there is something wrong with the doctor is not okay. Appropriate between 5 to 15 minutes of delay in exceptional situation. Patient being late is more acceptable. Sometimes 5-10 minutes is not okay. The doctor is not a problem. Doctors will wait. Italy maximum is 15 minutes. The doctors in Europe have more human approach and fit the patient in, make it happen. If the doctor is scheduled, doesn't charge the patient if there is no show. Jokes. I don't know why, guys. I noticed that American culture accept jokes and conversation as extremely sexual interest. They don't understand that in Europe we can listen someone and we can tolerate conversation that we are not interested in out of respect for the other human, not because we want to know, not because we want to be intimate, but just for the respect of the other human. So double standards, doctors and jokes, doctors can use, but they rarely use humors. They are perceived as flirtatious beginning in America. Americans do say jokes and it's okay if the doctor jokes, patient joking is okay, but not everyone would risk to joke. It has to be very dry, a snobbish style of jokes, neutral, no politics, no female male jokes, no jokes about death. Compliments coming from doctors are okay in any form and shape. However, from the patients are perceived as sexual harassment. If a patient compliments the opposite sex, nurses, medical staff, and this is sexual harassment. Compliments in America are negatively perceived by females, nurses, and medical staff. Doctors on the other side, they can do what they want to do because we have them on pedestal here in America. In other countries, doctors joke about different topics, medical, hobbies, everything, gardening, children. It's called a small talk. Doctors know the patients and they have this very familiar, they know about their hobbies, gardening, and everything else. It's always in European culture, there is topics about not the health, about the family, the hobby, the garden, and other things. The joking is part of social skills in European country. It's welcome. Also, black humor is welcome if you get it intellectually, yes. And it's okay in every direction. Doctor, patients, everybody joke. There is no sexual joking, of course, at the doctor's office, and it's not appropriate. Compliments are welcome in both parties. They're expressed to cheer up the medical staff, or form of gratitude are there also expressed as a way to say thank you or I appreciate you. There is nothing sexual in the jokes that Europeans do. Even if they say you're so beautiful, you make my day, it doesn't mean that they actually mean that. It means that they're complimenting you and saying thank you for your service. Although the jokes coming from males particularly should be more neutral, polite, and kind. For example, jokes does not mean sexual interest in other countries. In America, jokes are considered as a part of flirting. So you see, we have differences. Speaking loudly. Oh, doctors speaking loudly is form of expressing superiority, control, power, anger, annoyment. If a person doesn't want vaccines, they start to be loud, repeat very loudly, and shout almost aggressively because person has, there is a cultural prejudice here, and I talk to different Americans. I actually interview about 7 people to create that. Patients speak loudly is absolute taboo. For American doctor, yes, and if the doctor do it, is because they wanna show authority or insist about what you should do or pressure you in a way. You have to speak to the doctor always in inferior position and tone. Here is like you see the doctor and you do like this. Tinchini is the word in Italian because in America the doctors are perceived as some goddess powers that can do anything they want, and the patient have to agree and obey. However, for other countries, it's absolutely unacceptable for doctors to speak loud. Actually, if a person speak loud, especially doctor or nurse, is perceived of person that have mentally instability and has some serious mental deviations. And usually, if this is done, a European patient would not willingly go to the same doctor. This is not acceptable, not professional. It's must to be calm, polite, even if the patient disagree with you. If a patient disagree, once again in Europe, does not mean that they want to corrode the authority of the doctor. It means that they just see things differently. And it's not the doctor job to pressure them and insist and force the medicines or whatnot. The doctor explain politely, okay, you want to think about it, I let you think about it, here it is, you can decide when you're ready, let me know. Here it's something very different. If in Europe there is an older person struggling with hearing, the doctors would try to speak louder and slower, especially people with hearing aids. So if it's elderly struggling with this, yes, people who struggle with hearing, they also cannot hear the tone of their own voice, so they would naturally speak loudly, but the doctors are aware of this, and this is why this happened. Out of this exceptional situation, no loud speaking, no pressure is whatsoever welcome. Okay. Boundaries and entitlement, cultural boundaries, doctor superiorities. So in USA, it's very invisible. This whole thing that I'm sharing with you guys, it's not something that we say loud, but it's rules that we obey to, that Americans obey to. And as they never met any doctor who is professional, as European doctors, in my opinion, are a little bit better in some things compared to American doctors, because European doctors does not have this pedestal or authority. I believe the European doctors are a little bit more human and professionally developed. But this is not because they study the same thing, they have the same level of education. In Europe, more educated is a doctor, more higher is the level of the doctor, more professional, respectful, respecting your boundaries would be. If it's poor quality doctor, like let's call it a ghetto, forgive me with all the respect, the boundaries would be respected. So here in America, there is this invisible entitlement, superiority for doctors, lawyers, police, some administrative roles. They're superior and is inappropriate and offensive and rude to instruct or read protocols. As example, please address the patient directly. Often this is perceived as threat, argument, conflict, rudeness, aggression. The interpreter is looking for a conflict. Some of the responses when I read the protocol are, how dare you? You got a problem. Just do what I say. I am ordering you and you should do it. So this is absolutely unacceptable. And then this escalates to, if you don't do what I'm saying, I'm going to file a complaint. Interpreters in America are perceived as a lower level, especially from the medical provider and the medical staff, or at all. The medical staff believe that they shall tell the interpreter what to do. And if the interpreter dare to disobey, the interpreter deserves to be punished with complaint for not being professional. If the interpreter set a boundary of the professional role, the response is, how dare you? So American culture, it's not appropriate for the lower professionals to set boundaries to the higher professionals. In this case, interpreters reading protocols to medical staff is absolutely perceived as a rudeness, aggression, and a desire to conflict or doubt the authority of the doctor. So, of course, this is resented by the medical providers. It's not their fault. They have not been educated on how to use the interpreters. American culture and clothes. Here in America, dressing up is not important. For example, I dress up for a date wearing a stockings, and I was informed that I am looking for sexual interactions because I'm dressed as S, stars. In Europe, dressing up feminine, putting socks, putting heels, being beautiful as a female, it's perceived as a natural desire of a lady to look beautiful, to be well presented, to put nice things and show pleasantly. It's form of a respect for the other party. If it's very old grandpa, it's exactly the same thing. In Europe, you do not dress up because you want a male attention or because you want to be sexual. In Europe, you dress up because you want to please your friends. You want to be good on the eye for the people that have to look at you. You dress up with consideration for others. And in America, this is a very, in a way, how to say, very unhealthily distorted towards the males. A very strong patriarchat in America. While doing this surveys, I have been, I would say, openly harassed several times. Said that other culture, dressing up, going to the doctor is important. Clothes are a way to show status, well-being, money, social power, that you care for yourself and your well-being. And there is a proverb in Europe, by the clothes you are welcome and by the mind or intellect you're sent home. So it's mean in Europe, the clothes, it's a way to show that you're mindful about others. You need to look harmonious and present yourself well for the well-being of others. If you're badly dressed, more likely will be perceived as nobody in Europe. It's likely for you to be neglected, put to wait, and so on. It is shameful and not appropriate to not dress up in Europe. It's very important. The sources that I use, you could see in the previous slides. Also here, I'm gonna name them. I use the Protocols Code of Standards and Practice Interpretation Standards and NCI CIHC.org, caonline.org, California Standard, NCIHC.org. Once again, for the Code of Ethics, translation standards are www.alpha-it.org and ATA, American Translation Association.org. Other sources that I use are Journal Medline Culture.org, Sociology, Harvard, ScienceDirect.com, Masterclass.com, Shello.org.mx for Mexico, Salute.gov.it, Harvard Edu, SIA.gov, Phrase.com, Wikipedia, and Google. And this is it, guys. We know so much more right now. Thank you, guys, for being here. Gracias, grazie, благодаря, спасибо, благодаря ви, obrigado, danke, merci beaucoup, and nandri, and all other words. If you watch this video, if you handle this till now with me, thank you, guys. You learned so much now about your own culture and about other cultures. If you did this, thank you for being here. If you like to write something below this video, please feel free to do so. If you want to talk about your culture, do write me a comment below. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being part of my community, my channel, and thank you for growing with me. Bye-bye.